Chapter 723. Tan Xiu did not have the time to comfort Xueyu, who was panting softly beside him, nor did he have the time to investigate the condition of Xueyu's body. His consciousness was immersed in his own body in a flash. What's the situation? Tan Xiu's consciousness brushed across his internal organs, carefully observing the bones, meridians, ligaments, muscles. To his surprise, there was no improvement compared to before, but there was not much damage either. As his consciousness entered his dantian, Tan Xiu was stunned by the changes inside. In the originally spacious dantian space, the vortex-shaped black hole had completely disappeared, replaced by a miniature world. There were countless sesame-sized suns, moons, and stars in the empty space. Those planets were of different colors: red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and purple, illuminating the miniature world space like a dream. Compared to the vast universe, this was indeed a miniature space, but the area was thousands of times larger than Tan Xiu's previous dantian space. Tan Xiu's consciousness spread out, and to his shock, his consciousness could cover the entire space, and even found that the space was still slowly expanding under his precise perception. In addition, Tan Xiu also saw a tree, a lush tree tens of meters high. It was the Heavenly Path Universe tree that had taken root and germinated gradually. And near the tree trunk, a long sword with a colorful luster was quietly suspended. Where are the other things? There were a lot of things that Tan Xiu had put into his dantian, but at this moment, they had all disappeared without a trace. In order to figure out the reason, Tan Xiu hesitated for a moment, and then silently put the Blood Guzzler dagger into his dantian space. Buzz buzz. The moment the Blood Guzzler dagger entered the dantian space, a surging suction force came from the longsword, and the energy contained in the Blood Guzzler dagger was swallowed by the longsword. Even the invisible energy spread to the Blood Guzzler dagger, and the surface of the dagger began to corrode. What's going on? Tan Xiu quickly controlled the Blood Guzzler dagger to leave the dantian space. What made him want to cry was that in just a few seconds, the entire Blood Guzzler dagger had been completely destroyed. In addition to being a piece of scrap iron, it no longer had the status of a divine weapon. Is it that sword? Tan Xiu's thoughts moved and instantly fused into the longsword. What made him incredulous was that he found that he could actually control the longsword with his thoughts. As he unleashed it out of his body, Tan Xiu could control it as if it was his own arm and fingers, feeling the enormous energy contained inside it. A divine weapon. This sword is definitely better than the supreme-grade immortal weapon I used when I was a paragon in the immortal world. Looks like the things that I took into my body were all devoured by this sword. At first he felt a little heartache, but when he could officially control the longsword, his heartache instantly vanished. No matter how good an item was, it was still not as good as a divine weapon that truly belonged to him. Tan Xiu could even feel the hazy artifact spirit contained within this long sword. Its energy was very strong, but its intelligence was very weak. Only with time and continuous nourishment could it truly give birth to a sword spirit, and become an immortal or divine weapon that truly belonged to him. Suddenly, Tan Xiu found that there was actually a planet in his dantian space that was slightly larger than the other planets. The primal chaos force in his dantian space was actually constantly merging with this planet, and constantly dissipating from this planet. As he operated according to the heavenly art of cosmic genesis, the surging primal chaos force crazily surged out from the planet, and entered the meridians in his body. When he collected most of the primal chaos force from his meridians into his dantian space, it once again merged with the planet. Tan Xiu's discovery puzzled him. But after a long time of research, he found out that these so-called planets were actually the phantoms of countless stars in the starry sky of the universe that had been devoured by the massive primal chaos force. In other words, every planet was formed by energy. As long as there was more energy, the size of the planet would also be larger. In the end, it did not seem to be difficult to form a real planet. After a long time, Tan Xiu let out a bitter smile and slowly opened his closed eyes. He found that the celestial bodies were formed by primal chaos energy, a feeling of helplessness filling his heart. It was indeed a good thing for his body to evolve into a universe. After all, once this universe was truly formed, He would be the god of it. However, how much primal chaos force would be needed to accumulate tens of millions of planets into a real big planet? You're awake? It was unknown when Xueyu had put on her bra. She was leaning sideways and holding her head while watching Tan Xiao. Although she found that Tan Xiao had woken up, she was a bit shy and blushed, but she still looked at Tan Xiao face to face. Tan Xiao was a bit embarrassed at the moment. He was forced to have Xueyu's body at a critical moment. He could still clearly remember the pain Xueyu had to endure at the beginning. After coughing dryly, Tan Xiao sat up and said with a dry smile, Are you all right? Xueyu also sat up and gently shook her head. I'm fine. Thank you. Xueyu also sat up and gently shook her head. I'm fine. Thank you. Thank me. Tan Xiao was dumbfounded. He should be thanking her, shouldn't he? How did she become the one thanking him? According to what you told me before, it's not easy to sense qi, and it will take at least a year and a half to control it, said Xueyu softly. But if you want to truly cultivate true essence, it will take at least a year or two. I don't know what method you used, but I'm sure that I've stepped into the threshold of a cultivator and already have true essence. What? Tan Xiao suddenly recalled the previous situation and immediately reached out to check Xueyu's pulse. Half a minute later, a strange expression appeared on his face because he found that not only did Xueyu cultivate true essence, but the amount was also quite a lot. The yin and yang harmonization actually pushed Xueyu's cultivation to the early stage of foundation establishment. She directly skipped the qi refining stage? Tan Xiao's mouth couldn't help but twitch a few times. He felt that it was very absurd, but he had no choice but to accept the fact. Was this a blessing in disguise for Xueyu? Xueyu was oblivious to Tan Xiao's thoughts. A satisfied smile hung on her beautiful face as she said, I should be a cultivator now, right? When can you teach me some spells? You can learn at any time if you want to. Tan Xiao couldn't help but laugh. But first, tell me about the medicated diet. Xueyu's expression slightly changed upon hearing it, and she said in a low voice, I'm really sorry. It's also my first time cooking this medicated diet. You looked very scary and dangerous before. Are you all right now? Not only am I fine, but I also got a lot of benefits. Tan Xiao shook his head and smilingly said, I originally thought that the medicated diet I cooked at a great cost only had a lot of medicinal efficacy. I didn't expect that it actually contained a strange energy that made the space inside my body undergo earth-shaking changes. It seems that your Miao region does have a lot of good things. Then, do you want to go back with me? Xueyu asked with a smile. Tan Xiao thought for a while and said, I'm afraid I don't have the time in the short term. Let's wait for a while. I'll go to Kana's again after I'm done with my recent affairs. I've studied the 6 starlight array, and I may be able to make some new progress if I go there again. Maybe I can directly crack the 6 starlight array and take the immortal trove. Take me with you when you go to Kana's, said Xueyu quickly. I also want to see what kind of things this immortal trove is. All right. Tan Xiao readily agreed. Suddenly, both of them fell into silence. The enchanting atmosphere made both of them a bit awkward, and they didn't know what to say. After a while, Tan Xiao really couldn't stand the atmosphere and asked, Do you want to sleep for a while? Looking at the sky outside, Xueyu nodded and said, Then let's sleep for a while. Will you accompany me? All right. The duo hugged each other and quickly fell asleep. After an unknown period of time, Tan Xiao, who was sleeping soundly, was woken up by the urgent ringtone of his mobile phone. Xueyu, who was resting on Tan Xiao's arm, opened her eyes in a daze and asked, You got a call? Tan Xiao nodded and pulled his arm to take the mobile phone. He found that it was a call from Kong Xia. After connecting the call, he asked, What's up, Kong Xia? We've arrived in Shanghai, boss. Where are you now? Asked Kong Xia with a smile. Tan Xiao stared blankly and asked with a puzzled expression, Didn't you say you'll come here in 2 or 3 days? How come you've arrived in Shanghai in just 1 day? Kong Xia was at a loss whether she had to cry or laugh. Have you become muddle-headed, boss? It's been 3 days. Huh. Tan Xiao quickly looked at the date and found that it had indeed been 3 days. He didn't expect that drinking a bowl of medicated diet, experiencing a crisis, obtaining a benefit, taking Xueyu as his woman, and then taking a nap for a while turned out to be such a long time. Let's go to Blue Star Villa. I'll be back later. All right. After hanging up the phone, Tan Xiu put the mobile phone on the bedside table and said, I have something to do, so I'll be leaving first. Kong Xia has arrived in Shanghai with her company's people. I need to talk to them about the bidding for the next project. Is Kong Xia the CEO of the magnificent Tang Corporation? Asked Xueyu. Yeah. Tan Xiu nodded. She's very beautiful, said Xueyu. Tan Xiu didn't understand the meaning of Xueyu's words, but he had heard from that fatty, Yuan Chuling, that one must never praise another woman in front of another woman. Therefore he didn't answer her but said with a smile, I should be free tomorrow night, so I'll come and have dinner with you. All right. Xueyu was a bit reluctant, but she still controlled herself and nodded. Before she and Tan Xiu were husband and wife, she only occasionally thought of Tan Xiu and felt that she should miss Tan Xiu. But when it came to feelings, she only had a small liking for him, and didn't have too many feelings for him. But now it was different. She had completely given herself to Tan Xiu, whether it was her body or her heart. Therefore, even if it was only for half a day, she still felt reluctant to part with him. Put on some clothes. Tan Xiu smiled and kissed her forehead. Then he took out a new set of clothes from his interspatial ring. Chapter 724. Blue Star Villa Complex. Kong Xia had been here more than once or twice, so the security guards didn't stop her. The two nannies in the villa treated her as the hostess and served her. A hot meal was served on the table, but Kong Xia didn't even touch her chopsticks. When Tan Xiu returned home and saw Kong Xia in the dining room, he walked over and sat opposite her with a smile. What are you thinking about? Kong Xia came back to her senses, and a smile appeared on her beautiful face. She then said, It's nothing. I just feel very tired recently, so I want to go abroad to relax after I'm done with the bidding. Tan Xiu nodded and smilingly said, You can arrange the time yourself. But tell me in advance before you go. I need to send more people to protect you. I already have enough bodyguards. Kong Xia shook her head. That's because you think they're enough, but I don't think so. Tan Xiu sighed. Relatively speaking, it's very safe in the country. Those bodyguards can protect you both in the light and in the dark. But it's different when you go abroad. Many forces all over the world are now eyeing several products of our magnificent Tang Corporation. Once you step out of the country, I'm sure many forces will target you in just a few days. They will even pay a huge price to attack and kidnap you. Kong Xia slightly furrowed her brows. She thought for a moment and then said, Then forget it. I won't give myself a holiday. But it's all right. I can recommend a good place for you, Tan Xiu said with a smile. Where is it? Kong Xia asked. It's our future headquarters, Nine Dragons Island, said Tan Xiu. Yinin is there now. Kong Xia's eyes lit up and she said with anticipation, I know you bought Nine Dragons Island and are now renovating it. But I haven't been there until now. All right, then I'll go to Nine Dragons Island to have some fun. Tan Xiu nodded with a smile and greeted Kong Xia to have a meal. The two chatted while eating, and it didn't take long for the lunch to be finished. After returning to the living room, Tan Xiu learned from Kong Xia that all the senior executives of the magnificent Tang Corporation, who came to Shanghai with her, were arranged to stay at the Paradise Manor. What made Tan Xiu even more surprised was that Kong Xia also held the bidding meeting in the Paradise Manor. Why did you put it there? Tan Xiu asked in confusion. Kong Xia replied in a soft voice. Aren't we short on money now? Every penny should be used wisely. Anyway, Paradise Manor isn't an outsider's property, so we should keep the goodies to ourselves. The last time Ouyang Lulu called me to ask for wine, she didn't even try to be polite. So, it's always a good thing to be able to reduce some expenses. Cough cough. Tan Xiu was a bit embarrassed upon hearing this. He could sense a trace of resentment in Kong Xia's tone. However, he instantly thought of another matter. She said she was tired and wanted to go abroad to relax. Could it be because of me and Ouyang Lulu? Thinking of this, Tan Xiu had a headache. The relationship between a man and a woman was too complicated. He had already shot the arrow, and there was no turning back. It was just that he felt somewhat sorry for Kongxia. Kongxia's eyes turned dark. From Tan Xiu's expression, she realized that Ouyang Lulu's words were true. Although she had already prepared herself for it, there was still a deep feeling of sadness and depression inside her heart. Tan Xiu sighed inside. He knew that this was not the time to be silent, so he stood up and pulled Kongxia. Holding her hand, they walked out of the door. "Where are we going?" As Tan Xiu took out the car key and opened the door, Kongxia finally asked. Tan Xiu said, "You've been busy with the company's affairs, so I believe that you rarely go out shopping. In any case, there's nothing else to do in the afternoon, so you can put down your work first. I'll accompany you to go shopping." Kongxia understood Tan Xiu's meaning. He was apologizing to her. Speaking of which, she and Tan Xiu had been together for a long time, but the number of times Tan Xiu accompanied her to go shopping was actually very few. Shopping, eating delicacies, and watching movies. Throughout the afternoon and evening, Tan Xiu and Kongxia were inseparable, leaving their footprints in many bustling areas of Shanghai. It was not until the early hours of the morning that they returned to the Blue Star Villa complex. Following that, the matter between a man and a woman was in full swing until the two were exhausted and satisfied. What the two of them didn't know was that when they were satisfied, in a luxurious business room of Shanghai's Winge Road Hotel, a white-haired young man couldn't sleep at night and smoked bitterly. Chen Zixue, Zhejiang Province's Sunyuan Group's general manager, a millionaire with tens of billions of assets. He was the idol of many young talents, and also a diamond bachelor in the eyes of many women. A semi-finished product? Will it work? With a cigarette in one hand and a cup of water in the other, he looked distressed. Sunyuan Group could become one of the top 10 construction companies in the country, and it was inseparable from his personal ability. But at this moment, he was somewhat at a loss. He was not old, only 29 years old. 8 years ago, he was young and frivolous. He was definitely the leader of the rich and playboys in Zhejiang Province, and his reputation was in shambles. He originally thought that he could squander his youth freely and enjoy a good life, but the result was that the sky above his head collapsed. The previous general manager of Sunyuan Group's father died because of a cerebral hemorrhage, and the huge pressure suddenly fell on him. Although it didn't make him collapse, it still made his hair turn white overnight. The inheritance rights of 75% of the entire Sunyuan Group's shares made him the general manager, who countless people were waiting to laugh at. 8 years, he changed his former playboy style and crazily learned all kinds of knowledge, constantly filling in his shortcomings. It was as if he was bewitched. In the first year when he took over as general manager of Sunyuan Group, the company's stock index plummeted by nearly 20%, and the company's assets shrunk severely. In the second year when he took over, the company's income and expenses were balanced, and it could be said that it didn't make any losses or profits. In the third year, through an extremely risky merger and the opening sale of a new building, he earned back the losses of the first year when he took over, and there was still some surplus. The fourth year, the fifth year, the Sunyuan Group's income continued to increase, and it could even be described as skyrocketing. Pieces of land were bought by them, residential areas were opened for sale, and commercial buildings were sold in 8 years. The total assets of the Sunyuan Group had skyrocketed by more than 10 times. Chen Zixue had also become a famous real estate tycoon in the domestic business world, with a resounding reputation. Ring, 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 his mobile phone's ringtone sounded, causing Chen Zixue's expression to change. He quickly took out his mobile phone to answer the call and asked in a deep voice, "Did you find it?" "I found it." After a while, Chen Zixue hung up the phone, but then dialed another number. Blue Star Villa Complex. Tan Xiu had just fallen asleep when he was woken up by the urgent ringtone of his mobile phone. He looked at Kongxia, who was still sleeping soundly. Tan Xiu helplessly grabbed his mobile phone and found that it was an unfamiliar number. He hesitated for a moment but still picked it up and said, "Tan Xiu speaking, who is this?" "I'm really sorry to disturb you so late at night, Mr. Tang. I'm Chen Zixue of the Sunyuan Group. Spit it out if you have something to say." Tan Xiu's tone was a bit bad. After all, the matter between husband and wife made him a bit tired. He had just fallen asleep and was woken up again, which made him feel very depressed. I'm really sorry, Mr. Tang. I know it's wrong to disturb you so late at night, but I have no other choice, said Chen Zixue. Can you meet me now? Now. Are you kidding me? Tan Xiu looked at the time and found that it was 2:30 a.m. in the middle of the night, so he immediately spoke with a bad mood. I'm afraid that I'll be kicked out of the game tomorrow, said Chen Zixue with a forced smile. Tomorrow? Tan Xiu recalled the bidding for the project. He immediately recalled the list of the top 10 construction companies in the country given to him by Kong Xia, and the Sinyuan Group was one of them. As for the general manager of the Sinyuan Group, the real helmsman was Chen Zixue. But did he want to open the back door for the project bidding this late at night? Tan Xiu thought for a few seconds and said, Where are you now? Shanghai's Winger Road Grand Hotel. I don't know where that is. Come to Shanghai University within an hour if you want to see me. I'll be waiting for you at the university's gate. 40 minutes later, at the gate of Shanghai University, Tan Xiu was neatly dressed and sitting in a car, quietly reading the information he had just found on the internet. It was Chen Zixue's resume. The content was very short, but it had a lot of highlights. After reading it, he even had an illusion that Chen Zixue could be compared with him. His temperament had changed so much overnight that it was as if he had transmigrated back in time. Boss, the HQ just sent a document. Mo Ao stood outside the car window and handed the tablet to Tan Xiu. After reading it seriously, Tan Xiu's expression turned extremely serious. He didn't expect that the Everlasting Feast Hall would have Chen Zixue's information. The information was very detailed, and even some unknown things about Chen Zixue were clearly recorded. Pure young body. Gifted? The last comment of the document echoed in Tan Xiu's mind. The person who wrote it was Gu Xiaoxue. Tan Xiu hesitated for a moment before he dialed Gu Xiaoxue's number and asked, Why do you have the information about Chen Zixue? Why didn't you recruit him to the Everlasting Feast Hall? Grandmaster, Master happened to meet Chen Zixue when he was a child, so he asked us to pay attention to his situation. Later on, Master stayed in the exquisite pagoda all year round, so I was responsible for sending people to investigate him. I found that there was something wrong with his temperament, so I just sent people to collect his information, and didn't recruit him to the Everlasting Feast Hall. Temperament? When Tan Xiu read the document, there was a comment from Gu Xiaoxue. Unfathomable mind, wild and untamable in his bones, ruthless and merciless, and fond of unconventional methods. Tan Xiu hung up the phone and handed the tablet to Mo Ao, muttering, He's a good talent, but it's a pity that he was born here. Do you want to subdue him, boss? Asked Mo Ao with a moved expression. Tan Xiu was silent for a moment before he suddenly smiled and said, I want to observe him more. Few men can pique my interest these days. If there's a surprise, maybe. Chapter 725. The harsh winter had passed, but the air was still chilly late at night. Under the dim street lights, a few sparrows occasionally fluttered and flew over, their bellies rumbling with hunger as they braved the cold to forage for food. The moment the cigarette burned out, a black Mercedes-Benz came quickly and stopped behind Tan Xiu's car. A stalwart man opened the door and Chen Zixue stepped out from the inside. He tightened his black trench coat and took a roll of paper to Tan Xiu's car. Hello, Mr. Tang. Chen Zixue could see that Tan Xiu had no intention to get off, so he could only helplessly bow and greet him. Expressionless, Tan Xiu threw the cigarette but out of the window. He looked at Chen Zixue's slightly changed expression and said indifferently, Hurry up and tell me what you want to say. It's so cold outside. It's better to sleep under the quilt. Chen Zixue was silent for a moment. Then he suddenly let out a smile and said, I'm very sorry to disturb you so late at night, Mr. Tang. The main purpose is for the project bidding that your company is about to hold recently. Mr. Tang should have heard the saying that slow work produces fine work. Due to the short time given by your company, I personally led the design team to rush out the design drawings, and only 60% of them have been completed. Please take a look at the drawings. Tan Xiu casually glanced at him, and immediately took the drawing from the window. His eyes suddenly focused after he opened it and looked at it for a few times. The drawing of this design drawing was excellent. According to the main design line given by Tan Xiu, it was very well subdivided. Whether it was the height of the floors, the distribution of the buildings, the architectural shape, and the use of space, everything was done very well. Even though Tan Xiao didn't know much about modern architectural design, he still felt that it was a bit amazing. Unfortunately, this was a semi-finished product. Tan Xiao looked at the dozens of design drawings that were previously rolled up in the drawing again. Then he rolled it up again and handed it to Chen Zixue, saying, "It's too cold here. Let's talk somewhere else." A glint flashed in Chen Zixue's eyes, and he turned back to the car without hesitation. The two cars drove for less than 10 minutes and then stopped in front of a 24-hour convenience store on the nearby commercial street. "Welcome." The young and beautiful female shop assistant raised her head and greeted them at the same time. This 24-hour convenience store had a total of 2 male and 1 female shop assistant. All 3 of them were very young. However, when the female clerk behind the counter saw Tan Xiao, she was slightly stunned and said in surprise, "Tan Xiao?" When Tan Xiao first entered the store, he did not pay attention to the female shop assistant. When he heard the other party call his name, Tan Xiao looked over. What he did not expect was that the female shop assistant was actually Yi Lianyan. "Why are you here?" Yi Lianyan was surprised to see Tan Xiao, but she was still a little embarrassed and said, "I'm short of money, so I came out to work to earn some living expenses." "But you, why did you come out in the middle of the night?" Tan Xiao said, "I'm just looking for a place with a friend to talk about something. I didn't expect to meet you here. If you're short of money, just tell me. You can ask for anything below 7 digits as long as you promise to work for me in the future." Yi Lianyan laughed involuntarily and said, "Does this count as paying my salary in advance?" "I guess so," replied Tan Xiao. Yi Lianyan slightly shook her head and said, "A gentleman doesn't eat food given out of pity. I'm just a little girl. You can pay me my salary when I officially work for you." Not far away, the 2 male shop assistants curled their lips in unison, revealing disdainful looks on their faces. 7 digits? What a rich man. Just say it directly if you want to keep Yi Lianyan as your mistress. What a hypocrite. Both of them directly labeled Tan Xiao in their hearts. Tan Xiao turned his head and looked at Chen Zixue, who was smiling without saying anything behind him. He casually pointed to a table by the window and said, "Yi Lianyan, give each of us an Odin and 2 bottles of drinks." "All right, wait for me." Yi Lianyan smiled and left. Tan Xiao and Chen Zixue came to the table by the window and took a seat. Then Tan Xiao directly said, "Chen Zixue, I've seen your company's design. It's really good, but I don't get it. Why do you dare to come to Shanghai before the complete design is completed? You even dare to look for me in the middle of the night?" "Well, I must come for benefits," Chen Zixue said with a smile. "Benefits?" Tan Xiao disdainfully said. "Everyone wants to get benefits. But do you think you can get a share of the pie by looking for me now? It's very simple. Wanting to win such a big project in the tender held by the magnificent Tang Corporation without completing the design is absolutely a fool's dream," said Chen Zixue. "It's because I'm perfectly aware that no company will hand over the project to the other party without having completed the design. I'm gambling, and it turns out that my gamble is 40% correct." "How so?" asked Tan Xiao with interest. "The fact that you can leave your comfortable bed in the middle of the night proves that I've succeeded 20%, Chen Zixue said with a smile. "You've seen the semi-finished design and brought me here, which also proves that I've succeeded another 20%. Altogether, it's exactly 40%. You're very confident, and I appreciate your confidence." Tan Xiao nodded. "So, let's be more direct. You're only looking for me with the semi-finished design. What are you going to use to impress me?" Chen Zixue had played the script in his mind countless times, so he confidently said, "The magnificent Tang Corporation will build an industrial park and a HQ in Shanghai, but my Sun Yuan Group will only earn 100 million yuan from the start to the end. Once we win this project and start the construction, your company can send someone to supervise the entire process of the project, including all the funds needed for the project." 100 million yuan? Tan Xiao frowned deeply. He didn't think that Chen Zixue's earnings were more than 100 million yuan, but it was too little. According to the result of the discussion between Tan Xiu and Kong Xia, the investment for the construction of the magnificent Tang Corporation's HQ and industrial park in Shanghai must be at least 10 billion yuan. Only earning 100 million yuan for a 10 billion yuan project was absolutely not something any construction company was willing to do. I don't think it's that simple, right? Tan Xiu subconsciously took out a cigarette. Chen Zixue quickly grabbed a lighter and personally lit it for Tan Xiu. Boss Tang, you're really wise to have such achievements at such a young age, said Chen Zixue. The construction of the magnificent Tang Corporation's HQ in Shanghai as well as the entire industrial park is something I want to use as a prelude or a generous gift. As long as Boss Tang can promise me that all the construction projects of the magnificent Tang Corporation will be handed over to my Sunyuan group. Tan Xiu's complexion slightly changed, and a chilling light flashed in his eyes. He took out his mobile phone and immediately dialed a number in front of Chen Zixue, saying, "Investigate all the senior executives of the magnificent Tang Corporation. I want to know who leaked the latest branch construction plan of the magnificent Tang Corporation." Affirmative. The voice of the chief intelligence officer of the Everlasting Feast Hall came out of the phone. Chen Zixue maintained a calm smile all along, and quietly waited for Tang Xiu to finish the call. Then he touched his nose and smilingly said, "Boss Tang, I'm sure the investment won't be bigger than this project in Shanghai since your company has formulated such a development plan. Furthermore, you must implement this plan when the time comes and look for partners. To be honest, my Sunyuan group has been engaged in the real estate business for more than 20 years. For us to be ranked among the top 10 in the domestic construction industry, we absolutely have an excellent engineering team and implementation ability. However, my company has now encountered a bottleneck. If we want to break this situation and make our development to the next level, we must find a shortcut and take an unconventional path. But your magnificent Tang Corporation can lead us out of this bottleneck. Then, I want to ask you something. Do you know how many branches and product sales stores my company is going to build?" asked Tan Xiu indifferently. "I don't know." Chen Zixue shook his head and said, "But I dare to bet that the number is definitely not small." Tan Xiu knocked on the table and squinted his eyes. "Are you not afraid that I'll give you the HQ and industrial park project of Shanghai's magnificent Tang Corporation, but I'll directly go back on my words once you've completed it?" "I'm betting on your character," said Chen Zixue solemnly. "Sometimes character is simply not worth mentioning in the face of benefits," said Tan Xiu casually. "I'm betting on your character," said Chen Zixue again. "Also, I'll guarantee that my Sunyuan group will never be greedy in the follow-up cooperation. We must earn what we should earn, but we won't ask for a penny more if we can't earn it. What I can guarantee is that compared to other construction companies, your magnificent Tang Corporation's branches and exclusive stores will absolutely spend a lot less money, and the quality and quantity of the project will be guaranteed." "So your so-called benefit is the quantity?" asked Tan Xiu indifferently. "Yes." Chen Zixue firmly nodded. Tan Xiu nodded and didn't give any promise to Chen Zixue. Instead, he watched Yi Lianyan put 2 portions of Odin on the table and smilingly said, "This thing tastes good. I've eaten it here once. How about trying it?" Chen Zixue nodded. Although he was eating, he couldn't taste what it tasted like in his mouth. He silently calculated whether his chances of persuading Tan Xiu had increased, and if so, by how much. Tan Xiu quietly ate and occasionally glanced at Chen Zixue's face. He was secretly surprised and regretful after seeing the thoughtful expression on Chen Zixue's face. What surprised him was that Chen Zixue really had the ability. He was very satisfied with his conditions and had completely moved him. Regrettably, he found that Chen Zixue's ambition was too big during their exchange. Although he wasn't afraid of ambitious people, he didn't want to waste too many means on him. "Can I ask you a question?" Tan Xiu finished half a bowl of Odin and wiped his mouth with a napkin as he smilingly asked. Chapter 726. Chen Zixue swallowed the Odin in his mouth and picked up the water on the table to drink. Then he said, "I'll tell you everything I know. Please ask." "A wolf and an eagle. If you have to choose, which one will you choose?" asked Tang Xiu. "I'll choose the eagle," answered Chen Zixue without hesitation. Why? Asked Tan Xiao. Wolves are wild, fierce, and tenacious, just like you did 8 years ago. Although the eagle can fly high in the sky, it doesn't have the personality of a wolf, and can only rely on its innate talent to survive in the food chain. Chen Zixue calmly said. The eagle soars high in the sky and overlooks all living beings. I'd rather be aloof than to be a wolf, even if it's a pack of wolves. Tan Xiao faintly sighed inwardly. If it were a wolf, he could still tame it. But it was not so easy to tame an eagle. He had to worry about having his eyes pecked out to catch an eagle. Although Tan Xiao had the ability to protect himself, he didn't want to waste too much time. Not to mention, Chen Zixue had too much wealth. In case he became a cultivator, he would be competitive in terms of resources in the future. After returning to Earth, Tan Xiao found that there were indeed a lot of precious herbs on Earth, but they were limited and he didn't want to look for trouble. What a pity! Tan Xiao took out his wallet and put 100 yuan on the table. He then stood up and said, "Let's meet at the bidding meeting." After saying that, after bidding farewell to Yi Lianyan, he directly left the 24-hour convenience store. He recognized Chen Zixue's deal and his ability, but he didn't recognize him as a person. Chen Zixue didn't get up. His mind was filled with all kinds of thoughts as he recalled the words Tan Xiao said before he left. Although he had realized that Tan Xiao would most likely choose the Sunyuan group to participate in the bidding meeting, but what did the last sentence, "what a pity," mean? He couldn't figure it out and felt a bit depressed. "Do you still want Odin, sir?" Yi Lianyan came to Chen Zixue with a smile, and asked while cleaning up the disposable lunchboxes left by Tan Xiao. Chen Zixue slowly raised his head and looked at Yi Lianyan's beautiful appearance. His heart suddenly stirred and he asked, "You're called Yi Lianyan, right? I'm Chen Zixue Sunyuan. Forget it, I'm a few years older than you. If you don't mind, just call me Big Brother Chen." Yi Lianyan smiled and said, "Hello, Brother Chen." Chen Zixue nodded and asked with a smile, "Can we sit down and talk?" Yi Lianyan complied and sat on the chair that Tan Xiao had originally sat on. She then asked with a smile, "Big Brother Chen should be a very capable person, right? I overheard your conversation just now. It seems like you're going to do business with Tan Xiao?" Chen Zixue found it funny and said, "Does it mean that I'm very capable to do business with Tan Xiao?" Yi Lianyan smiled and said, "Of course. Tan Xiao is very capable. If you are not capable, why would he not sleep in the middle of the night and come here to discuss business with you? However, through your conversation just now, I realized that you should be begging him." Chen Zixue couldn't help laughing and said, "That's right. I'm begging him to give me a way to make money." Yi Lianyan giggled and said, "I believe that your dream will come true as long as you're sincere. Tan Xiao, he's very soft-hearted sometimes." "You seem to know him very well?" Chen Zixue was surprised. Yi Lianyan thought for a while, and then shook her head. "I don't know him very well, but I can sense the luminous spots on his body. As a matter of fact, Big Brother Chen is also quite handsome, but you don't seem to be as charming as Tan Xiao." Back then, Yi Lianyan's words came to an abrupt halt. She seemed to realize that there were some things that she couldn't say and finally said with an awkward expression, "Back then, Tan Xiao was my savior." A smile outlined on the corner of Chen Zixue's mouth. His originally depressed mood turned a lot better. He was a calm and composed person and rarely talked nonsense with strangers. But at this moment he had an impulse to chat more with Yi Lianyan, so he didn't hurry to leave and asked with a smile, "Tell me, what abilities does he have to be able to become the savior of a great beauty like you?" "Sorry, I can't tell you." Yi Lianyan let out a dry laugh. "Ha!" Chen Zixue looked straight at her. Yi Lianyan felt a bit scared under Chen Zixue's stare. She secretly regretted talking too much and hurriedly got up and said, "Big Brother Chen, I don't think you're a bad person, so I'll tell you something. Don't have any crooked thoughts about Tan Xiao, else you'll end up miserable." After saying that, she immediately returned to the cashier, and no longer looked at Chen Zixue's direction. Chen Zixue slightly furrowed his brows. He retracted his gaze from Yi Lianyan, and looked pensive. Yi Lianyan didn't want to say anything, so the matter behind it was definitely not simple. Although his curiosity was aroused, he suppressed it. Early morning the next day, Tan Xiao woke up from his sleep, and found that the beauty beside him had disappeared. After he dressed and washed up, he came to the first floor and found some movements in the kitchen. "You got up so early?" Tan Xiao leaned on the door and asked with a smile while watching Kong Xia's back, who was wearing an apron and cooking. Kong Xia turned her head and smilingly said, "You got up early, huh? Why didn't you sleep more?" Tan Xiao smiled and said, "I have some serious business to do today, so I got up early to join in the fun. But today's bidding will still be presided over by you. I'll just be an observer." Kong Xia laughed and said, "You're such a leisurely big boss. Anyways, go to the dining room and wait for a while. Breakfast will be ready soon." Tan Xiao didn't leave and said, "Chen Zixue called me last night, and we met last night." Kong Xia stared blankly and immediately turned around and asked, "Why did he look for you?" Tan Xiao said, "The Sunyuan Group's design has yet to be completed, but they negotiated a deal with me. This person is very amazing. He is the most amazing business genius I have ever seen. Let me tell you something. The latest development plan of our magnificent Tang Corp has been leaked out." "What?" Kong Xia's complexion greatly changed, and a faint trace of anger emerged in her eyes. "I've already sent some people to investigate this matter," said Tan Xiao. "All the senior executives of our magnificent Tang Corp will be investigated, and I'm sure we'll get the results soon. What I want to tell you is that although the Sinuan Group's design is only half completed, I have seen it and it is very good. If there aren't any particularly outstanding designs or low prices in today's bidding, then choose the Sinuan Group." "This is not a trivial matter." Kong Xia frowned. "I understand what you mean." Tan Xiao nodded. "However, Chen Zixue had told me exactly what he was thinking. He had an ulterior motive. Although the project in Shanghai is very large, he knows very well that it's too late for him to come up with a complete design. Hence, he didn't want to give up, so he put forward his other purpose." A few minutes later, Tan Xiao explained Chen Zixue's plan and finally said, "Since he gambled on me, then let him gamble. The company's skyscraper and industrial park will be handed over to the Sinuan Group. Once the project is completed, we can ignore him if he's too greedy." Kong Xia quietly pondered for a while and then forced a smile. "You're thinking too simply. This Chen Zixue has seen that we're going to set up a branch company and a unique exclusive store in the second half of the year, so he made this request. Don't forget that the magnificent Tang Corp's HQ and industrial park project will be completed in half a year. Even a year is not enough time. According to our discussion, it will be completed by the end of next year." "I know. But the branch companies and exclusive stores in each province can't be built all at once, no?" Tan Xiao lightly smiled. "Then throw 1 or 2 provinces' projects to the Sinuan Group. After that, we'll move on to the next province. If the Sunyuan Group dares to demand an exorbitant price and is too greedy, we can stop the cooperation in time." Kong Xia thought for a while and then smilingly said, "What you said makes sense. All right then. If there are no other surprises today, then let's set it to the Sinuan Group." The breakfast was sumptuous and tasted great. After Tan Xiao and Kong Xia finished their breakfast and were about to go to the Paradise Club, an uninvited guest arrived and made Tan Xiao's plans for the day fall through. "Grandpa, why are you here?" Tan Xiao looked at the troubled Tang Guosheng and asked in surprise. Standing in front of Tang Guosheng, Kong Xia looked a bit uneasy. Tang Min, who was accompanying Tang Guosheng, was also a bit restless at the moment. She looked at Tan Xiao, wanting to say something but hesitating. Even though Kong Xia and Tan Xiao were living together, she didn't have the mood to say anything. "Xiao, let's go to your study room and talk." "All right." Tan Xiao led Tang Guosheng and Tang Min to the study room, while Kong Xia was responsible for serving tea. After the fragrant tea was served to Tang Guosheng and Tang Min, she was about to leave. "Sit there." Tan Xiao pointed to the chair inside the desk. Kong Xia stared blankly and hesitated for a moment before she obediently walked over. Tang Guosheng was a bit surprised. He looked at Kong Xia and then at Tan Xiao, and then slowly said, "Something big has happened. It's related to the life and death of hundreds of thousands of people, as well as the lives of a large number of overseas intelligence agents and military soldiers. It's also related to the survival and destruction of our Tang family's hidden forces. Tan Xiu was shaken inwardly. He simply couldn't believe his ears. It must be noted that this was an era of peace. How could such a serious matter happen? Grandpa, what's the matter? Tang Guosheng was a bit hesitant. He had been in the military for a lifetime and had seen countless people. Although he could see that the relationship between Kong Xia and Tan Xiu was unusual, he didn't know if he could trust Kong Xia. It was because what he was about to say was too important. It was important to the overall situation, and it was even more important to Tan Xiu. Tan Xiu had an outstanding mind. He noticed that Tang Guosheng was looking at Kong Xia again, and immediately understood what he was thinking. Then he resolutely said, "Grandpa, Kong Xia is my woman. She's also a close family member, and she's also a cultivator. Please speak freely if you have anything to say." Chapter 727. It was the first time for Tang Guosheng and Tang Min to hear Tan Xiu admit the fact that he had a woman. Even Mu Weining, who was well known to the outside world, was something Tan Xiu had never admitted. At this moment, the father and daughter exchanged glances and finally accepted Kong Xia completely. A cultivator. Kong Xia was also a cultivator, which meant that she was indeed Tan Xiu's most capable assistant. At this moment, the two of them realized that it was no wonder Tan Xiu could hand over the power of the magnificent Tang Corporation to Kong Xia. "Kong, you'll be the daughter-in-law of the Tang family from now on." Tang Guosheng turned to look at Kong Xia. After saying that, he directly turned his head and picked up the cigarette that Tan Xiu put down on the tea table. The daughter-in-law of the Tang family? At this moment, monstrous waves surged in Kong Xia's heart, and her delicate body couldn't help but tremble a few times. Great ecstasy accompanied by happiness made her feel unprecedentedly satisfied. She cared about Tan Xiu, and naturally, she also cared about the approval of the elders of the Tang family. Sometimes, she would have a little fantasy, but she didn't expect that her dream would come true. Feelings needed to be promoted by external factors, and it also needed the sincere care of the loved ones. What Tan Xiu just said made her feel satisfied, and it deepened her feelings for Tan Xiu. Tang Guosheng lit the cigarette and took 2 deep puffs before he slowly said, "This matter is very troublesome. It can be said that it's a big problem. If it's not handled well, not only the entire country will suffer a loss, even our Tang family will suffer a huge loss." "Grandpa, don't keep me guessing. Just tell me the specifics," said Tang Xiu. "Do you know about Miss Source Island?" asked Tang Guosheng. "I've never heard of it." Tan Xiu shook his head. "Is there such an island in our country? I used to think that it was a good thing for the country to conceal the existence of this island, but I didn't expect that such a situation would happen." Tang Guosheng sighed deeply. "As a matter of fact, Miss Source Island is an island that suddenly appeared 20 to 30 years ago in the sea area outside of Treasure Island, only 800 nautical miles away. When this island appeared, the country immediately sent a large number of troops, geologists, and biologists to land there. Do you know what's going on with that island, which is about the same size as the Treasure Island? It's all made up of towering mountains and primeval forests. At first, there were many ferocious beasts and a large number of precious minerals. Even the medicinal herbs growing in it, according to the judgment of some highly respected old Chinese doctors, were thousands of years old. I've been there before. There's even a palace on top of a mountain in the center of the island. It's an ancient palace, but no one has been able to climb that mountain. No one has been able to take a look inside the palace. After the country's secret development, Miss Source Island has been completely controlled by our country. There are a lot of elite soldiers stationed there. And at the same time, the families of some soldiers and researchers who went there in the early days also live there. Now the entire Miss Source Island has hundreds of thousands of residents." At this point, Tang Guosheng stopped and took another puff of his cigarette. Tan Xiu was shocked. How is it possible that the existence of Miss Source Island can be so secretive given the current situation? Don't you think the current media power is enough to expose the situation there? It's because the existence of Miss Source Island has been exposed that many countries have been coveting it, sighed Tang Guosheng. More than a decade ago, many countries have been trying to occupy it. But our country has stationed troops there, And it's also part of our country's sea area, so they have never succeeded. Treasure Island also tried to meddle, but it was suppressed and they could only choose to remain silent. If that's the case, then what exactly is the crisis? Asked Tan Xiao. Those foreign countries have always been coveting Miss Source Island. They even tried every means possible to send people to sneak into the island. But there were no major problems because the coastline was heavily guarded. Tang Guosheng suppressed his anger. But in recent years, some forces secretly supported by those foreign countries have been carrying out intense infiltration work. What's more, those foreign forces have really infiltrated the island, and the number is not small. Just 6 days ago, a resident of Miss Source Island suddenly fell into a coma. After the medical staff there examined him, they found that it was a virus. The infected patient had been in contact with a lot of people, so all of them were infected. Moreover, the degree of infection has been increasing, and the virus is spreading at an extremely terrifying speed. On the 4th day, 80% of the people in the entire Miss Source Island have been infected. Up until today, even the garrison there has been infected. Hundreds of thousands of people. Although the country's top virus experts were sent there a few days ago, they were helpless. Just yesterday, the old divine Dr. Gui Jianqiu, who is stationed in the imperial capital, also rushed there. How did this virus come about? Asked Tan Xiao with a frown. Someone from the world's most dangerous organization, the Stygian Club, sneaked into the island and injected the virus into the first infected person, said Tang Guosheng in a deep voice. The foreign black market is selling antivirus strengthening drugs. Those who have been injected with the drug in advance will not be infected by the virus again. Therefore, thousands of people from the Stygian Club and other forces have landed on Miss Source Island in the past 7 days. The garrison has had several fierce battles with them, and both sides eventually suffered losses. Some of them are very powerful. Tan Xiao slammed his fist on the table and angrily said, "It's this damn Stygian Club again. It seems that its existence is indeed a scourge." "You know about the Stygian Club?" asked Tang Guosheng with a serious expression. A cold light flashed in Tan Xiao's eyes as he nodded and said, "I've dealt with the Stygian Club's people several times, and they suffered losses every time." "Grandpa, do you mean you want me to go to Miss Source Island?" "I do have such a plan, but it's very dangerous there now." Tang Guosheng nodded and said, "On one hand, there's the threat of the virus, and on the other hand, there are various foreign forces eyeing covetously. I'm also worried." Tan Xiao interrupted Tang Guosheng and solemnly said, "Don't worry. It's just a virus. It won't harm me. As for those foreign forces, unless they use nuclear bombs, they won't be able to threaten me much." Tang Guosheng nodded without a word and bitterly said, "There are people from our Tang family on Miss Source Island. I instructed your second grandpa to secretly set up a martial arts training camp on the island. After you get there, you can contact the people from the state first, and then secretly go to Tongzhuang Martial School to find Tang Han." "Who's Tang Han?" asked Tan Xiao. "She's your uncle's eldest daughter," answered Tang Guosheng. Tan Xiao was shocked and asked in surprise, "My uncle has an eldest daughter? How come I didn't know about it?" Tang Guosheng forced a smile and said, "In the past, in order to be stationed on Miss Source Island secretly, I announced to the public that your uncle's eldest daughter died at the age of 4, and was secretly sent to Miss Source Island. After training her since childhood, she successfully took over the affairs of Tongzhuang Martial School at the age of 18. It's been 11 years now. That child can only quietly return to the imperial capital once every 2 years. She's 29 years old now, but the number of times she came back is only 12. Our Tang family owes her too much." Tan Xiao felt deep veneration for this cousin he had never met. He nodded and said, "I got it, Grandpa." Tang Min took out 2 things from her bag. One was a small green book with only 2 words written on it, "Security." The other was a black badge with only a blood drop pattern on it. "This green book is the certificate of the State Security Department, Xiao. I've already done it for you. This badge is the symbol of our Tang family's secret forces. Take it to see your sister and she'll naturally believe you," said Tang Min in a low voice. Tan Xiao nodded. After hesitating for a moment he asked, "Grandpa, who else wants me to go to Miss Source Island besides you?" Tang Guosheng and Tang Min exchanged glances. Then Tang Guosheng forced a smile and said, "Sure enough, I can't hide it from you. It's the one on top." "Which one?" "The one with the highest position." Tan Xiu squinted his eyes and asked, "Are there any benefits?" "Just one sentence. Let bygones be bygones and be loyal to the country," said Tang Guosheng. Tan Xiu was shaken inwardly. He subconsciously grabbed a cigarette and lit it up. After taking a few deep puffs, he grinned and said, "This old man is compromising and also handing me an imperial sword. If my guess is correct, he won't take back this green book later, right?" Indeed. Tang Guosheng knew that his grandson was smart and immediately nodded with a smile. Tan Xiu got up and said, "If that's the case, then I'll take this job. When will you leave?" "The sooner the better," said Tang Guosheng. "The military base in Shanghai has prepared a military helicopter and can take off at any time." Tan Xiu looked at Kong Xia and said, "I can't accompany you for today's matter. Also, don't disclose my whereabouts to anyone." Kong Xia got up with a deep worry. She nodded and exhorted, "Safety first." "I got it," Tan Xiu replied. Tang Guosheng didn't hurry to leave, and neither did Tang Min. They looked at Tan Xiu's back as he quickly left the house and sighed at the same time. Shanghai Garrison Base. Hu Zhenfeng, dressed in military uniform, had been waiting for a long time. He was the chief of staff of the General Staff Department of the Miss Source Island Garrison with the rank of senior colonel. Originally, he was going to take a vacation and return to the imperial capital, but a major event happened in Miss Source Island. He received an order to escort Tang Guosheng to Shanghai and to stand by at the Shanghai Garrison Base. Stand by and wait for someone. He didn't know who he was waiting for, nor could he figure out the identity of the person who made him a chief of staff of a senior colonel. Wait. D4 black SUVs came from a distance and parked near the helipad of the military helicopter. As a big man in a black suit opened the door, Hu Zhenfeng's eyes fell on the rear door of the third car. He knew that the person who could directly drive the car from the outside and come here was definitely a big shot. Chapter 728. Tan Xiu did not intend to bring a lot of people to Miss Source Island this time. In addition to Mo Au, who usually followed him, there were only 10 other bodyguards. Although there were many unknown enemies, he was confident that he could kill them all. However, on the way to the garrison base he made a few phone calls. In addition to asking for leave from his homeroom teacher, Han Qinggu, he also informed Xueyu. In addition, Li Laozhan had been busy recently and said that he would find time to have a meal together. Originally, he wanted to treat Li Laozhan to a meal, but he was in a hurry to leave Shanghai, so he had to call him in advance. As soon as Tan Xiu got out of the car, he saw Hu Zhenfeng, who was tall and straight in a military uniform. After walking straight to him, Hu Zhenfeng directly took out a green book and said, "I'm Tan Xiu. We need to go to Miss Source Island immediately. This is the certificate." Hu Zhenfeng took the green book and glanced at it a few times. He then nodded and said, "I've received orders from the higher-ups. This military helicopter will take us to Nansha province, and then we must take a ship to Miss Source Island. If the journey goes smoothly, we can arrive before evening." Tan Xiu frowned and asked, "Can't we fly there directly?" Hu Zhenfeng shook his head and said, "According to the provisions of the military aircraft agreement, no flights are allowed to travel to and from Miss Source Island. The Air Defense Department has set up an intercontinental armed system on Miss Source Island. Once you approach within 50 kilometers of Miss Source Island, you will be regarded as an enemy and will immediately open fire." Tan Xiu asked, "Not even a military helicopter? Don't tell me there aren't even fighter jets there?" "No. Is it because it's not suitable?" Hu Zhenfeng shook his head. "Why do you say that?" asked Tan Xiu. Hu Zhenfeng forced a smile and said, "There's a strange magnetic field shrouding a dozen kilometers around Miss Source Island. Any unit instrument would malfunction once it entered there. In addition, Miss Source Island is surrounded by a deep layer of fog. Since the island was discovered, the fog only dissipates for 2 hours a day, and only during those 2 hours can one enter and exit Miss Source Island." "Array formation?" Tan Xiao pondered for a few seconds before he nodded and said, "Forget it. Let's go now. Can this helicopter fit so many of us?" Hu Zhenfeng said, "Excluding the 2 pilots in the cockpit, the cabin can only accommodate 10 people. Since I don't know how many of you are coming, I only asked the military to prepare this helicopter. But I can apply for another helicopter now. Sorry for the trouble." Tan Xiao nodded. 2 minutes later, 2 military SUVs roared over and quickly stopped nearby. As 7 fully armed soldiers in camouflage uniforms got off the vehicles, a lean man at the front put the camouflage bag in his hand on the ground and saluted Hu Zhenfeng. "Yu Shuqing, captain of the Phantom Special Combat Squad, reporting to the chief." After Hu Zhenfeng returned the greeting, he said with a smile, "After receiving the order from the higher-ups, I knew that I would see you, my old friend. Your Phantom Special Combat Squad has made great contributions to the country all these years. The old chief has praised you a lot in front of me." Yu Shuqing smiled and said, "Serving the country is our duty." Hu Zhenfeng nodded and glanced at the other 6 members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad. He nodded with satisfaction and said, "I'm completely relieved to have your Special Combat Squad following me to Miss Source Island. Shuqing, let me introduce you. This is Tan Xiao, the person in charge of the Miss Source Island incident. All the members of your Phantom Special Combat Squad are responsible for accepting his command." Yu Shuqing furrowed his brows, but he still saluted Tan Xiao. "Yu Shuqing, captain of the Phantom Special Combat Squad, reporting to the chief." Behind him, the other 6 members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad had their complexions slightly changed, and a bit of anger could be seen in their eyes. After coming here, they found that Mo Ao and the others around Tan Xiao had extraordinary temperaments and a faint smell of blood, which was a big threat even for them. However, Tan Xiao was too young and they had always acted alone. Now that they were suddenly assigned to work under an unfamiliar young man, they were very dissatisfied. "I don't need other helpers, actually." Tan Xiao nodded indifferently and said, "But since you've accepted the order, it's not good for me to refuse. After we arrive at Miss Source Island, I'll explain to the chief military officer there to let you stay at the base." A cold light flashed in Yu Shuqing's eyes as he indifferently said, "You're crazy." Tan Xiao shook his head and no longer paid attention to him. He greeted Hu Zhenfeng and then boarded the military helicopter with Mo Ao, Jin Shi, and the others, leaving only the 2 experts of the Everlasting Feast Hall behind. "Boss, I've dealt with this Phantom Special Combat Squad before," said Shueisha in a low voice after taking a seat in the cabin next to Tan Xiao. "When?" asked Tan Xiao with furrowed brows. "When I found Mouse before, one of the members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad was following us and I intercepted him halfway," said Shueisha. "He didn't see my face, so he didn't know that I've dealt with them." Tan Xiao suddenly understood. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth as he said, "It seems that they're the ones who fought with the Sui Company in Shanghai. If not for our special identities, I'm afraid this Phantom Special Combat Squad is already very powerful for ordinary people. I can wipe out their entire squad if I act," sneered Shueisha. "Don't talk nonsense." Tan Xiao snappily scolded with a smile. "They're just ordinary people. Who do you think you are? Do you have the nerve to compare yourself with them?" "Ugh." Shueisha let out a hollow laugh and lowered his head, no longer speaking. Below the military helicopter, Mo Xiaonan, one of the members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad, glanced at the 2 big men, Xue Gue and Yi Shisan, and immediately asked, "What are they doing, Chief?" "Don't ask what you shouldn't ask." "I don't know." Hu Zhenfeng shook his head. Mo Xiaonan said, "You don't know?" Mo Xiaonan said, "Then you want us to listen to the orders of that Tang brat? Isn't this some kind of international joke?" "That's an order," said Hu Zhenfeng in a deep voice. Yi Shisan shot a cold look at Mo Xiaonan and coldly said, "If you dare to insult our boss again, I'll kill you on the spot even if you're from the military." "Boss. I thought it was some big shot, but it turns out to be a boss," sneered Mo Xiaonan. "What are the higher-ups thinking? People who want us to listen to their orders? Also, there are bodyguards who like to talk nonsense. What a joke." A displeased look also appeared on Yu Shuqing's face, but he thought about it more. He felt that it was impossible for a pure businessman to have the qualifications to come here, and even have the right to order them. He glared at Emo Xiaonan and said in a deep voice, "Shut up." Emo Xiaonan coldly snorted and provocatively looked at Yi Shisan and Shui Gue, no longer speaking. 20 minutes later, another military helicopter was ready and soon disappeared into the clouds as Hu Zhenfeng and the others boarded. 2 hours later, 2 military helicopters arrived at the Nanxia Province Garrison Base. Furthermore, the Nanxia Province Garrison Base also sent 6 military jeeps to send everyone to the military port, the Freedom Liner. After boarding the medium-sized liner, Hu Zhenfeng exchanged some words with the people on the liner, and then directly set sail to Miss Source Island. From Nanxia Province to Miss Source Island, they needed to bypass the Bao Island, so it took a lot of time to sail. It wasn't until the evening that the liner entered a misty sea area. Interesting. Standing on the bow deck, Tan Xiu looked around with his hands behind his back. He could clearly feel a special energy drifting around him, which should be the energy carried by the mist. However, this energy drifting had a positive and stable pattern, which was not formed naturally but caused by an array. Tan Xiu, pay attention to your safety later. This sea is not peaceful. Hu Zhenfeng came out of the cabin with a faint smile and stood side by side with Tan Xiu. Tan Xiu turned his head and asked, "Tell me, how is it not peaceful?" "There are fierce beasts in this sea," said Hu Zhenfeng. "Do you know what fierce beasts are?" They are the kind of wild beasts with simple intelligence, but their attack power is many times stronger than wild beasts. Especially in this misty area, there are black sharks living there. Fortunately, our ship is made of iron. If a wooden ship passed here, those black sharks would have bitten through the wooden ship. Tan Xiu asked, "Has no one ever hunted these black sharks?" "How could they not be hunted?" Hu Zhenfeng said, "But there are a lot of these black sharks and they are social creatures. Every time they appear, they will form groups of at least hundreds of them. Our garrison has sent troops to clean them up many times, but we always feel that we can't kill them all and destroy them all." Tan Xiu nodded and lightly said, "After we solve the crisis on Miss Source Island, I'll send some people to help clean it up. After this battle, I'm afraid that the news of the existence of Miss Source Island can no longer be blocked. We really need to solve this crisis before ordinary people come here." Hu Zhenfeng's mouth twitched twice as he glanced at Tan Xiu with a trace of contempt. He had seen a lot of capable people, and also met a lot of people who could brag, but none of them could be as arrogant as Tan Xiu. Even the army couldn't clean up those black sharks, yet this Tan Xiu had never seen one. Yet he dared to talk nonsense here. He really couldn't understand why the higher-ups would send such a guy to solve the crisis on Miss Source Island. The liner moved forward. Soon, the liner passed through the misty area, and the island looming in the distance could be seen in a wide field of vision. When the liner docked on the island, Hu Zhenfeng personally brought a batch of masks. "I don't need them." Tan Xiu shook his head lightly. "Don't mess around, Tan Xiu," Hu Zhenfeng angrily said. "The virus on Miss Source Island is very serious. If the ship wasn't equipped with gas masks, I would have made everyone wear them. Quickly take them and put them on. We're going to disembark." Tan Xiu didn't take them. He walked to the edge of the deck and instantly sprinted forward. The distance of 6 or 7 meters was crossed by him in a single step, and his feet directly landed on the shore road. Mo Ao and the others also followed him and jumped to the shore one by one. Chapter 729. On the liner's deck, Hu Zhenfeng's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets when he saw Tan Xiu and his men easily jump 6 or 7 meters away. The world-long jump record was 8.95 meters, but that was due to the inertia of sprinting at full speed. Although the deck was only 6 or 7 meters away from the shore, the seemingly easy jump without any run-up was simply beyond Hu Zhenfeng's imagination. They're really monsters. They can jump so far with just a lift of their legs. If they were to participate in the Olympic long jump, they would definitely break the world record. Hu Zhenfeng's contempt for Tan Xiu was reduced a lot. The members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad, including Captain Yu Shuqing, were also surprised by the long jump ability of Tan Xiu and his men. Although they could also jump ashore, it was definitely not as easy as Tan Xiu and his men. Captain, it seems that these guys are experts. Chen Yongfan, who had always been proud of his speed, approached Yu Shuqing and spoke with a solemn expression. I've long noticed that they are experts, but I didn't expect them to be more powerful than I expected. Yu Shuqing nodded. I'm afraid you're the only member of our Phantom Special Combat Squad who can barely do this. Chen Yongfan forced a smile and said, they need a few run-up steps, else it'll be a bit difficult. Since they can be appointed by the higher-ups to solve the crisis here, I don't think they are bad, said Yu Shuqing. All of you, stay alert and don't have any unpleasant encounters with them. All right. Several people nodded. On the shore, a medium-sized bus that could accommodate more than 20 people was parked. There was only a young man in leather clothes and a mask standing at the door. When he saw Hu Jinfeng, his eyes suddenly lit up. He strode forward and saluted. Chief of Staff, you're finally back. Our garrison is in big trouble. What's the situation now? Asked Hu Jinfeng. How many people in the army have been infected by the virus? The young man said bitterly. A total of 88 people from the 2 ships patrolling the nearby waters are not infected. The rest are all suffering from a fever and symptoms of weakness. We've taken various antiviral drugs, but none of them have any effect. The preventive drugs we bought from the foreign black market came too late. Apart from those 2 ships, do the other officers and soldiers still have combat ability? Asked Hu Jinfeng hurriedly. The young man nodded and said, it's fine for a short time, but it can only last for 3 to 5 days at most. Chief of Staff, the first person infected with the virus died 6 hours ago. There are still dozens of people on the island who are seriously ill and could die at any time. Hu Jinfeng's expression slightly changed as he asked in a deep voice, how many people on the island are uninfected? An angry look flashed across the young man's face as he said, there are more than 1,000 people, and more than 90% of them are from some foreign forces. They took preventive medicine before coming, so they weren't infected. Division Commander Yang didn't want us to have any conflict with them. That's why those people were so arrogant on the island, but they didn't do anything out of line. They are scattered all over the island, surveying the island's mineral resources and gathering all kinds of information about the island. A chilling light flashed in Hu Jinfeng's eyes as he asked, did you bring the gas mask? The young man nodded and said, yes, 30 in total. Hu Jinfeng turned to look at Tan Xiao, Yu Shuqing, and the others and said in a deep voice, we didn't take any preventive medicine before, so we must wear gas masks to avoid getting infected. Chief of Staff, we bought 100 preventive medicines from those foreign forces. We don't need to worry about getting infected after taking them. We just need to wear a mask. After saying that, he poured out a lot of black pills from the small bottle he carried and handed them to Hu Jinfeng. Hu Jinfeng's eyes lit up as he grabbed one and immediately stuffed it into his mouth. He then handed it to Yu Shuqing and the others and watched them take it. However, when he gave it to Tan Xiao refused it. We don't need it. Tan Xiao didn't want to take this unknown medicine because he firmly believed that the infectious virus posed no threat to cultivators like them. Tan Xiao, you may be the person in charge of solving this crisis, but you can't be arrogant and conceited, said Hu Jinfeng angrily. Since this preventive medicine is effective, you must take it for the sake of safety. You're not my superior, so I don't need to obey your orders, said Tan Xiao indifferently. All right, time is of the essence. Let's hurry up. A burst of rage surged out from the bottom of Hu Jinfeng's heart, but he forcefully suppressed it. He couldn't figure out the origin of Tan Xiao and the others. He even felt that Tan Xiao and the others were not from the Security Bureau. On the road, Tan Xiao learned about Divine Dr. Gue Jianqiu's situation from the young man who drove the car. He learned that Gue Jianqiu had also taken the preventive medicine and was now studying the virus on the island. However, he just arrived yesterday and hadn't found any results yet. After driving for more than 2 hours, the bus entered a rugged mountain road. After more than half an hour of bumpy journey, it finally drove into an olive-green military camp. Yang Chuxiong was the commander of the garrison. Although he was only a division commander, he had the rank of Major General. He was not old, only 46 years old. He had a stocky build and looked like a fierce tiger general. Welcome, Tan Xiao. The moment Yang Chuxiong saw Tan Xiao, he looked slightly surprised. Although he had received the order from his superior and learned that Tan Xiao had come to help solve the crisis, he didn't expect that Tan Xiao was really as young as the rumors said. Hu Jinfeng might not know about Tan Xiao's past achievements, but Yang Chuxiong had investigated him through his authority and found that Tan Xiao was not simple at all. "You're Division Commander Yang, right?" Tan Xiao slightly nodded. "I've learned about the situation on the way here. It's terrible, isn't it?" "It's more than terrible. It's simply terrible," said Yang Chuxiong bitterly. "If we can't solve the virus in the next 2 or 3 days, I'm afraid more than half of the hundreds of thousands of people on the island will die." 2 or 3 days. What about Divine Dr. Gue Jianqiu? Tan Xiao asked bluntly. "Take me to see him." "He's in the temporary laboratory inside," said Yang Chuxiong immediately. "We've collected the blood samples of the infected people. Divine Dr. Gue Jianqiu is going all out to study the nature of the virus and find a way to concoct an antidote." 10 minutes later, Tan Xiao saw the legendary Divine Dr. Gue Jianqiu. He was wearing a white coat and a pair of white gloves. He was in a temporary laboratory, using a pair of tweezers to pick up a small piece of rotten flesh and observe it. "Hello, I'm Tan Xiao." Tan Xiao stepped forward and introduced himself. Gue Jianqiu was a very thin man with a solemn expression on his wrinkled face. After hearing Tan Xiao's words, he slightly furrowed his brows and carefully observed Tan Xiao a few times. Then he slowly nodded and said, "You're the young divine Dr. Tan Xiao of Star City Chinese Medical Hospital. You're a medical grandmaster that makes my 2 proud and arrogant disciples feel ashamed of their inferiority. I've paid attention to some of the cases you've treated, especially your acupuncture technique. It's simply magical and amazing." "You're overpraising me, Senior Gue Jianqiu," said Tan Xiao politely. "Senior Gue Jianqiu, since you came earlier than me, can you tell me the results of your research? Also, what about the virus? I've been studying medicine all my life, and I've encountered countless kinds of diseases. But this virus is very strange. It has a wide range of transmission routes. It's transmitted through saliva, blood, air, water. Any healthy ordinary person has the possibility of being infected as long as they are within 10 meters of the infected person. Of course, I've also studied Western medicine and have some achievements in it. But it's very difficult to extract a virus sample no matter what method is used to extract it. Also, I've tried hundreds of methods and used a large number of medicinal herbs to conduct research, but none of them can kill this virus. Its activity is too strong." Tan Xiao was silent for a moment. He then flipped his hand and took out a porcelain bottle. He handed it to Gue Jianqiu and said, "This is a kind of medicine I've refined. It has a very good effect in tempering the human body. Put this medicine into it and see if it has any effect." Gue Jianqiu looked surprised, but he still took the porcelain bottle. He carefully poured a drop from the inside and dripped it on the rotten flesh. Buzz, buzz, buzz. It was as though a strong sulfuric acid was poured on the rotten flesh. The rotten flesh rotted at a very fast speed, and eventually turned into a puddle of pungent black liquid. Gue Jianqiu frowned and forced a smile. Not only is it ineffective, but it will also cause the infected person to die. Tan Xiao squinted his eyes. He grabbed a pen and paper on the table and quickly wrote down a series of medicinal herbs names. Honeysuckle, wild lily, poison string, black scorpion, golden cicada shell. "Oh, come in." Tan Xiao shouted in a deep voice. Mo pushed the door and came in asking, "What's your order, boss?" Tan Xiao handed him the list and seriously said, "Go find these medicinal herbs immediately and send them here as fast as possible. Ask Division Commander Yang to help. He's more familiar with this place than you." "Understood." Mo took the list and left. Gue Jianqiu's eyes retracted from Mo's back and asked with a confused expression, "Tang? I'll call you Little Tang. What's the prescription you gave me?" "The body refining medicine I concocted has the opposite effect of the medicinal herbs I just gave you," said Tan Xiao. "I want to try the opposite effect to see if it will be effective against this virus." Gue Jianqiu pondered for a while before he nodded and said, "It's quite possible. I also used medicinal herbs to decoct the medicine before. but it didn't have any effect on the rotten flesh after being poured on it. When things reach an extreme, they will go in the opposite direction. Maybe the prescription you just gave will have an effect. Tan Xiao forced a smile and said, I'm just trying to find a doctor in a desperate situation. I don't want to let go of any possibility. To tell you the truth, my medical skills are somewhat special, but there's one thing I'm sure of. It's absolutely incomparable to yours. You haven't studied the nature of the virus and haven't researched the medicine to treat the infected, so I'm afraid I'm even worse. Chapter 730. Don't belittle yourself, little Tang. Gui Jianqiu shook his head and said, Perhaps it's because of your special medical skills that you were able to take an unconventional approach and finally find a solution. That's right, I just had a new idea. Let's study it before we find the herbs you need. What do you think? Gui Jianqiu spoke his idea and the two immediately began experimenting. After failing, the two continued to discuss and experiment. Proposals emerged one after another, but the experiments failed again and again. Time passed. As a cultivator, Tang Xiu was able to withstand the prolonged research, but Gui Jianqiu, on the other hand, was already quite old. Although he had been paying attention to recuperation all these years, he still had no choice but to stop the research due to exhaustion and ran to the next room to sleep for a few hours. The next afternoon, the death data of the infected people on Miss Source Island had been recalculated. The number of infected people who died from the virus had increased to 562. Just as the data was sent to Tan Xiu, Mo hurriedly returned with the herbs Tan Xiu needed. All the herbs are here, boss. Mo placed 2 suitcases in front of Tan Xiu and wiped the sweat on his forehead. Tan Xiu nodded and immediately began to refine the medicine. After several hours of refining, a pitch-black pill was successfully refined. Under the watchful eyes of divine Dr. Gui Jianqiu, he ground the pill and sprinkled it on the rotten flesh. This time, the rotten flesh didn't immediately corrode and fester, but it didn't have much effect on the virus. Lil Tang, did you notice that after I sprinkled the medicinal powder you refined, black lines appeared on the rotten flesh? I used a magnifying glass to observe it. Those black lines are composed of countless extremely fine active particles, as though they are alive. In Western medicine, they can be called bacteria, said Gui Jianqiu slowly. Tan Xiu pondered for a moment. Suddenly, a ray of light flashed in his mind and he hurriedly said, If they're bacteria, then they're viruses and bacteria. There are many ways to sterilize them. We can consider the electric current sterilization method. Electric current sterilization method? Gui Jianqiu stared blankly for a moment. He suddenly thought of something and immediately said, 42 years ago, the eccentric doctor in the northeast Gao Yitong invented the electric current sterilization method. It uses static electricity to encircle and suppress viruses and bacteria. Although this method was rarely used in reality, it was still popular in some mountainous areas in the northeast. I think we can give it a try. Give it a try. Tan Xiu did as he thought of it. To his pleasant surprise, after he used the electric current to sterilize the rotten meat, the black lines in the rotten meat continued to burn, turning into a pungent black smoke. However, the rotten meat gradually became brighter. Through the research of Gui Jianqiu and Tan Xiu, they discovered that the virus and bacteria were actually suppressed. It's effective, but the speed at which the viruses and bacteria divide and grow is too fast. Although the electric current sterilization can kill a large number of viruses and bacteria, it's very difficult to eradicate them. If the human body is constantly electrified, it can temporarily remove the worry of death and temporarily suppress it, Gui Jianqiu said excitedly. Let's find a live experiment. In addition, we need to generate static electricity into the human body, but it will not harm human health. Strive to let every infected person use it. Tan Xiu nodded heavily. All right. There were 4 common ways to generate static electricity, namely, charge migration, breaking electrification, induction electrification, and contact separation. Among them, the most suitable method to be used in a large number of people was contact separation, such as chemical fiber underwear, carpets, cushions, wallpaper, and other items. After contact and separation, static electricity would be generated. In addition, when household appliances are in use, they will also produce static electricity, or the outer shell will carry static electricity, such as the television screen or computer screen. After temporarily studying this plan, Tan Xiu did not hesitate to reflect the situation to Yang Chuxiong, and then through the TV broadcast, radio promotion, mobile phone information dissemination, and military soldiers running around to spread the news. On the third night after Tan Xiu landed on Miss Source Island, the virus crisis was finally temporarily solved, and countless people who were on the verge of death finally hung on the line of death. In the terrain of Miss Source Island, there were only 4 areas suitable for living, which were continuously opened up by the people who lived here for decades. Between the mountains, there were some villages, but according to official statistics, there were only 24. Every village had a population of at most a few thousand, and at least a few hundred. Python City, Wolf City, Doublebrook City, and Mixed Summit City. The population of these 4 major urban areas, the largest Python City had 1 to 200,000 people, while the smallest Mixed Summit City had only 70 to 80,000 people. After decades of development, now all 4 cities had been opened up, and there were even a number of main roads and dozens of small roads and mountain roads connected together. Mixed Summit City. Rows of collective village buildings were moving in a neat and orderly manner. The bustling commercial streets were almost no different from the outside world cities. Although this place was very secretive, with the secret support of the country, there was still a steady flow of materials from the outside world. People living here, in addition to relying on the government to eat, can also collect medicinal materials, find minerals and other resources, and even have many private factories. On a street in the north of the city, dozens of burly men in suits surrounded the 5 buildings. Not even a drop of water could trickle through. From time to time, many people came from all over and hurriedly entered the 5 buildings. In the middle building, Keith Moore, a high-ranking member of the Stygian Club, was smoking the world's top Cuban cigar and tasting delicious coffee while quietly listening to the report of his trusted subordinate. We've investigated that the person who invented the electrostatic therapy is called Tan Xiu. According to the investigation, he's the behind-the-scenes boss of China's magnificent Tang Corporation. He's also a Chinese medicine practitioner known as the Young Divine Doctor. We haven't investigated how he came to Miss Source Island. Further, the electrostatic sterilization method can only temporarily suppress the virus, but it can't completely cure it. He's also a great help to us, said the thin middle-aged man. Keith Moore's eyes flickered as he nodded and said, "You're right. We didn't bring the virus to destroy all the humans on this island. We just wanted to destroy some of them, and then control the fate of most of them in their fear, so that we can order them around in the future. However, there's a problem with the environment here, which caused the virus outbreak to multiply and eventually made us lose control. The appearance of Tan Xiu is a relief to us." "What should we do now, sir?" asked the thin middle-aged man. Keith Moore stroked his chin and coldly said, "Send an assassin to capture that Tan Xiu. Since he can come up with the electrostatic sterilization method, it shows that he's a great talent. Maybe we can use him in the future. Also, don't relax in surveying the mountain range around Mixed Summit City. We've only surveyed a small lithium mine. The more mineral deposits we survey, the bigger our harvest will be when we negotiate with the Chinese authorities in the future." "Understood. I'll arrange it immediately. But what should we do in case that Tan Xiu resists?" asked the thin middle-aged man. "We can't kill him even if he resists," said Keith Moore in a deep voice. "Since he can find a way to suppress the darkening virus in such a short time, I'm sure he can develop a new antidote. We'll need the antidote when we negotiate with the Chinese authorities in the future." "I understand," the thin middle-aged man replied and turned to leave. Keith Moore watched as the thin middle-aged man left. Then he clapped his hands and 2 pale young men in black windbreakers appeared in front of him. "You two take the Spectre team and quietly follow him. That Tan Xiu's identity isn't simple. I believe the Chinese military will protect him. If the assassination fails, you two will take over the arrest." "Understood." The 2 young men agreed, and their figures instantly disappeared from the spot. In a valley dozens of kilometers south of Twin Brook City, lush trees, fresh flowers, and wild animals could be seen everywhere. It was a scene full of vitality. Compared to the lifeless atmosphere in Twin Brook City, there were dozens of military tents set up here. A dark-skinned foreign old man in a black tuxedo stood on a slope south of the tents, leaning on a golden crutch. Behind him were 2 men and 2 women in black leather clothes, shrouded in a chilling aura. It was completely out of place with the lively scene in the valley. Even some wild animals avoided them from afar. "Shoo, how's the preparation of the virus gene conversion catalyst?" asked the foreign old man all of a sudden. Behind him, the man on the far left replied with a hoarse voice, "It's only the last step. It's estimated to be ready in 3 days." The foreign old man nodded with satisfaction and said, "That Tan Xiu of China who suddenly came to Miss Source Island does have some skills. He's much better than those idiots under Keith Moore. Our pyramid organization has come here and ruined the Stygian Club's plan, so we must be prepared to tear all pretense of cordiality with them. Send some people to make trouble for them. They want to explore the mineral deposits, so we must not let them have their way." "Get it done at once," said Shu respectfully. The foreign old man touched his chin and said, "Immediately take some men to kill that Tan Xiu after giving the order. It's a relief that he found a way to temporarily suppress the darkening virus. But we must never let him find the real cure for the darkening virus, nor let the Stygian Club capture him." "I can go alone, sir," said Shu with a hideous grin. The foreign old man snorted coldly and said, "There's an old saying in China that it's better to be safe than sorry. I know you have the strength, but don't lose your life because of your arrogance." Chapter 731. At the military encampment on Miss Source Island, Tan Xiu and Gui Jianqiu finally heaved a sigh of relief after finding a way to suppress the darkening virus. Yang Chuxiong, the highest-ranking officer on Miss Source Island, excitedly held a celebration banquet after being infected for several days and having the darkening virus suppressed. Night fell. With the end of the celebration banquet, Tan Xiu decided to go out for a stroll and see his cousin, Tang Han. When he told Yang Chuxiong about his intention to leave the military encampment, Yang Chuxiong strongly dissuaded him. "Divine Dr. Tang, the situation on Miss Source Island is very chaotic now, not to mention the panic caused by the darkening virus, which has led to many pessimists causing trouble. Just the foreign forces are all arrogant and despotic, with malicious intentions. I'm afraid you'll be in trouble if you run into them. I received the order to solve the problem on Miss Source Island, not just to study the infectious disease." Tan Xiu shook his head. "Division Commander Yang, if I stay here because I'm afraid of danger, what's the point of the one at the top to send me here?" "The one at the top?" Yang Chuxiong stared blankly for a moment. His pupils suddenly shrunk and a horrified look appeared in his eyes. Although he received an order to assist Tan Xiu in solving the crisis on Miss Source Island, he didn't know which big shot issued the order. At this moment, the one Tan Xiu mentioned gave him a huge shock. "Is it really number 1? Yang Chuxiong was silent for a while before he hesitantly asked. "Yes, it's him." Tan Xiu nodded. Yang Chuxiong looked at Tan Xiu with a complicated expression and said, "If that's the case, then I won't stop you. But I'll personally accompany you around. If you run into danger." Tan Xiu waved his hand to interrupt him and said, "You need to stay here to stabilize the overall situation, Division Commander Yang. You can mobilize the troops in time in case some lawbreakers attack the army. As for my safety, do you think I don't have any ability since I'm valued by that person?" Yang Chuxiong was rendered speechless by Tan Xiu's rhetorical question. After observing Tan Xiu for a long time, he forced a smile and said, "I'm afraid that something might happen. Even if that person, there's still Senior Tang. If Elder Tang gets angry, I won't be able to handle it." Tan Xiu said, "Since my grandpa dared to let me come here, he must have been prepared for trouble. So he won't bother you." Yang Chuxiong finally compromised. "How about this? I can choose not to follow you, but I'll send more people to follow you." Tan Xiu asked, "Is there anyone else in the army who can follow me at any time?" Yang Chuxiong's breathing stagnated as he bitterly smiled and said, "You're right. Everyone in the army has been infected by the virus. Not to mention acting as guards, it's already good enough that they don't have a fever. By the way, when you came, didn't all the members of the Phantom Special Combat Team come along? Put them in charge of protecting you. I really don't. Tan Xiao, it's decided. Otherwise, I won't feel at ease. Tan Xiao's heart was filled with helplessness. He could not tell Yang Chuxiong that he was an immortal cultivator. Nor could he tell him that the 11 subordinates he brought were all immortal cultivators. After learning about the threats from various forces, especially the Stygian Club, he realized that the ones he was about to face were not ordinary people. If he were to encounter the Stygian Club's assassins again, even 10 members of the Phantom Special Combat Team wouldn't be able to protect him. Even it would become a burden instead. However, looking at Yang Chuxiong's firm look, Tan Xiao nodded with a headache. Half an hour later, after Yang Chuxiong temporarily found 4 black SUVs, Tan Xiao directly boarded them and left with Mo Ao and the others. As for the Phantom Special Combat Team following behind, he pretended not to know about them. Where are we going, boss? Mo Ao was in charge of driving and asked after leaving the military camp. Have you investigated it clearly? Tan Xiao asked. Where's the most central location of Miss Source Island? Mo Ao asked. Zidane and Fengyang went there personally and have investigated it clearly. It's more than 100 kilometers north of Mixed Summit City. Although the traffic in the 4 major cities has been opened, we still need to take a detour to avoid the mountains. It'll take us 4 or 5 hours to get there from here. We don't need to rush there if there's no Phantom Special Combat Team following us, Tan Xiao said. But now, let's go and have a look first. Which car are Zidane and Fengyang in? In the car behind us, said Mo Ao. Pull over and park the car. Shueisha, you and Zidane get off the car, said Tan Xiao. I have something to ask him. All right. Shueisha, who was sitting next to Tan Xiao, nodded. Quickly. The thin Zidane hurriedly sat next to Tan Xiao. After closing the door, he said, Do you have something to ask me, boss? That's right. You and Fengyang personally went to the most central mountain of Miss Source Island. Did you see the palace on the top? Asked Tan Xiao. What's the situation over there? Mo Ao asked. When we were far away, we observed it through binoculars. We can indeed see the palace. Although it's not magnificent, it's still majestic. However, when we were 600 meters away from the mountain, we were blocked by the fog. After another 100 meters or so, it was so dark that we couldn't even see our fingers in front of us. Moreover, there was a special air pressure that prevented us from going any further. In other words, even you can't go inside. Tan Xiao asked with a smile. We can't go inside, said Zidane with a forced smile. Although we don't know anything about arrays, we've been with you for a long time, boss, so we can tell that it's caused by arrays. It's already very good that we can go 100 meters inside the fog. If ordinary people were to go inside, I'm afraid they would be forced out by the air pressure inside after walking more than 10 meters inside. Is that all you found? Tan Xiao thoughtfully asked. That's only part of it, boss. Dan immediately shook his head. We circled around the mountain and found a village near the south side of the mountain. There are 1,000 or 2,000 households living there. We also sneaked into the village to observe and found that there are foreign experts in the east, west, and south of the village. I don't know how they occupied several courtyards, but the defense is very tight. In addition, there are also people stationed on the north side of the mountain. There are nearly 100 people in total. They look like hired mercenaries. The leader is an old white man, and he's also a cripple. Have you found out their identities? Asked Tan Xiao. Apart from the more than 20 people stationed on the east side of the village, I screened them through the internet and finally determined that they are from the Mexican Mafia Reston organization. The leader is the second in command of the Reston organization, Jinlei Duomo. She's a ruthless character. We haven't investigated the other 3 forces. There are too few sources of information here. What are foreign gangsters doing on this island? Asked Tan Xiao with a frown. Dan didn't answer. He couldn't figure it out. In the early hours of the morning, the 2 cars of the Phantom Special Combat Squad members arrived at the Wolfpack City. If it was in the past, the streets on both sides of the streets of the Wolfpack City would be brightly lit, illuminating the surrounding buildings. But at this moment it was different. The roads on both sides were dark. Although there was moonlight, it still looked quite dark. Only when they passed the intersection would the traffic lights be lit, radiating a little light to the road. However, usually at this time, the residents would have already turned off the lights and gone to sleep. But now every house had lights on, and they could occasionally see the figures of the residents who hadn't gone to bed yet from the windows. Boss, we're being watched. Moo, who was driving, suddenly had a cold light flash in his eyes. While observing the road ahead, he said vigilantly. Tanxiu instantly released his divine sense, covering a radius of 300 or 400 meters. More than 300 meters behind the 6 cars, there was a car without lights following. On a tree on the side of the road, 2 men in black leather jackets were observing the convoy with binoculars. In addition, a young man on a roller skateboard was moving forward from the next street. His speed was very fast. In an instant, Tanxiu could tell that the other party was definitely not an ordinary person. Even a special forces soldier couldn't match his speed with a roller skateboard. Keep going and find the hotels in the Wolfpack City, Tanxiu indifferently said while monitoring with his divine sense. Boss, according to our understanding, all the hotels in the entire Mist Source Island have closed down, and a small number of their staff have been fired. There are no people in those hotels at all, said Moo. I understand the current situation. Even if they can't provide services, at least there are empty rooms, said Tanxiu lightly. Let's stay here tonight, and continue our journey tomorrow morning. All right. At the Grand Hyatt Hotel. It was the tallest hotel in the Wolfpack City with a total of 5 floors. Except for a small number of rooms with lights on, the rest were all dark. The glass door of the hotel had already been locked with chains and chains. Even the reception area on the first floor of the hotel was empty. After the 6 cars stopped, Moo easily opened the lock on the hotel's door. After pushing the door and entering, Tanxiu and the rest stopped their pace with the faint light in the hall. I'll find someone to book a room for us, said Moo after looking around. Tanxiu raised his hand to stop him and lightly said, Don't be anxious. Everyone, get ready for battle. We don't need to call them later. Some people will come down naturally. In a flash. Except for Moo who stood vigilantly beside Tanxiu, the other 10 experts of the Everlasting Feast Hall instantly hit on both sides. They grabbed their sharp daggers and vigilantly watched the hotel's entrance and the corridor on both sides. Battle preparation? The members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad looked puzzled. They didn't find any special situation at all, so why would they need to prepare for battle? Yu Shuqing was puzzled, but he still quickly made a few hand gestures. As the bullets were loaded, they carried their guns and dispersed. Chapter 732. In the dimly lit lobby of the hotel, Tanxiu stood in the center with his eyes locked on the hotel's entrance. The moment 2 middle-aged men in black leather jackets with grim expressions entered the door, the members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad had already aimed their guns at them. Tanxiu, Divine Dr. Tang. The yellow-haired middle-aged man in leather jackets on the left directly ignored the muzzles of the Phantom Special Combat Squad and stopped 7 or 8 meters away from Tanxiu. Tell me your background, said Tanxiu indifferently. You don't need to know our identity for the time being. You just need to know one thing. Tell your trash men to put down their guns and come with us alone. You'll naturally know who we are when we get there. Preposterous, self-righteous fool. Tanxiu sneered. Don't tell me you don't know that running amok in our country's territory is a violation of our country's laws? The law is bullshit in front of us, said the middle-aged man with a gloomy face. I hope Mr. Tang will speak politely. The fact that we can find you in time shows our ability. We've already given you enough face by inviting you with courtesy. There's an old saying in your country that you refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. I hope Mr. Tang won't make the same decision as this saying. Are you threatening me? Asked Tanxiu. Since the soft approach doesn't work, we can only use the hard way, said the middle-aged man coldly. But before that, I ask Mr. Tang to seize the last chance and come with us. Yu Shuqing pointed the muzzle at the yellow-haired middle-aged man's temple. He vigilantly approached the yellow-haired middle-aged man and said in a deep voice, "Mr. Tang won't go with you. You must consider the consequences before you act." The middle-aged man turned his head and observed Yu Shuqing. He then nodded and said, "No wonder Mr. Tang is so fearless. It turns out that you have experts protecting you. If I'm not mistaken, these should be the special soldiers of the Chinese military, right? Since we're going to use force, why don't we have some appetizers first? Let's have a spar, shall we?" After saying that, he clapped his hands. And immediately, 8 men in suits with sabers on their backs flashed in from outside the door. They exuded a cold aura, and quickly stood in a row behind the thin middle-aged man. Yu Shuqing vaguely felt that these people were not ordinary. After pondering for a moment, he took a step back and said in a deep voice, "Gongzi, come and play with them." The Phantom Special Combat Squad's Wei Qinggang, whose fighting level was second only to Yu Shuqing, handed the gun in his hand to Mo Xiaonan beside him. He then quickly removed the other equipment on his body and twisted his neck. With a cracking sound, he took a few steps forward and sneered, "Who wants to play?" The thin middle-aged man sneered and raised his right hand to hook his finger forward. A man on the far left of the row took a few steps forward and came in front of Wei Qinggang. He then spoke in English, "I'm the weakest in my squad, but it's not a problem for me to deal with you. Come, let me see the strength of China's special forces." Wei Qinggang assumed a fighting stance and sneered, "Don't bite your tongue when you're boasting. Bring it on." Tan Xiao secretly shook his head. The hidden experts of the Stygian Club were absolutely innumerable. The assassins he encountered in Laoshan Mountain in Changxi City were all heterogeneous with terrifying strength. But the thin middle-aged man in front of him and the guy next to him were not human. Their strength was very likely very strong. As for the 8 men of the thin middle-aged man, each of them had a strong smell of blood on them. Their killing intent surged and released a strong murderous aura, proving that they were very strong. At the very least, they were battle-hardened experts. Wei Qinggang? He's probably not that guy's match. However, Tan Xiao didn't intend to remind Wei Qinggang since he didn't have a good impression of these guys from the Phantom Special Combat Squad. Especially at this moment, he didn't even open his mouth, yet Yu Shuqing, the captain, jumped out and made his men fight with the opponent. This was simply stupid. At the same time, Tan Xiao also had another purpose. It would be best if all the members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad were injured. That way, they wouldn't have to follow him like a tail and wouldn't affect his actions on Miss Source Island. At this time, Wei Qinggang was full of confidence. He had won the championship in fighting in 2 consecutive military region tournaments. Even though he attached great importance to the enemy, he still unconsciously believed that the opponent couldn't beat him. Seeing that the opponent didn't take the initiative to attack, he was too lazy to be modest. His footsteps instantly sprinted and fiercely kicked the opponent. If an ordinary person was hit by his kick, they would be seriously injured even if they didn't die. Too slow. The man shook his head and muttered to himself. He grabbed Wei Qinggang's ankle with lightning speed and kicked the inner thigh of Wei Qinggang's other leg. In the blink of an eye, he punched Wei Qinggang's face with his other fist. Bam! Wei Qinggang, who was full of confidence, was sent flying by the opponent's punch. He was dizzy and fell under the wall at the side. Had it not been for his strong resistance, he would have been knocked out by the opponent's heavy punch. One move. The winner was directly decided. The man, with a disdainful expression, spat at the place where Wei Qinggang fell. He didn't pursue the victory, nor did he kill him. With disdain, he returned behind the thin middle-aged man, put his hands behind his back again, and no longer looked at Wei Qinggang. The members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad were dumbfounded. They looked at the man who defeated Wei Qinggang as if they were looking at a monster. They knew each other well and naturally knew how strong Wei Qinggang's fighting strength was. But they couldn't figure out why Wei Qinggang was defeated by the opponent in just one move. Yu Shuqing's heart was violently shaken. The other members of the Phantom Special Combat Squadron did not clearly see the enemy's attack route. They only felt that the opponent's speed was very fast, and his strength was sufficient. However, he clearly captured the opponent's attack route and judged the opponent's terrifying speed. So fast. So strong. No one in the entire Phantom Special Combat Squad is his opponent. Even if I burst out with my strongest attack, I'm afraid I can't defeat that guy. Whether it's strength or speed, the opponent is too strong. Yu Shuqing looked at Tan Xiao with shame. He began to secretly regret that he shouldn't have jumped out prematurely to protect Tan Xiao. Only at this moment did he realize that Tang Xiao had never uttered a word since the moment he stood up. He didn't say a word, nor did he express any attitude. Tan Xiao glanced at Yu Shuqing's expression and completely grasped his mentality. After a moment of silence, Tan Xiao lightly said, "Victory and defeat are common in the military. This failure doesn't mean that we will fail again and again in the future. As long as our ambition remains undiminished, and we continue to work hard in the future, I believe that the day of victory will come sooner or later. But since I'm the person in charge of Miss Source Island, no one can jump out and ask for a snub without my order in the future." "I understand." Yu Shuqing nodded bitterly. Tan Xiao shifted to the thin middle-aged man and lightly said, "Since you want to fight first, then I'll accompany you to the end. Shueisha, come out and play with him." Shueisha flashed out from the corner of the corridor and instantly appeared at Tan Xiao's side. He cupped his fists and walked to the middle of the two parties, grinning hideously and said, "I always felt that fighting and killing was very boring. I didn't expect to meet so many experts today. It seems that we'll have some fun. Hey brat, come out and let's have a fight." The thin middle-aged man hooked his finger at his subordinate and indifferently said, "It's not the last moment yet, so there's no need to turn hostile and kill. However, don't be too lenient. It's fine if you don't die, but you must be seriously injured." "Got it," replied the man. He glanced at Shueisha contemptuously and instantly dashed forward. In nearly the blink of an eye, he had already dashed to the front of Shueisha. He suddenly slapped his palm and instantly attacked Shueisha's face. "You're too slow." Shueisha sneered and his figure instantly turned into an afterimage. Before the man could react, his palm had already penetrated Shueisha's phantom. Just as the man's determined strike failed, his expression slightly changed and he was about to launch a second round of attacks, but he was directly slapped to the ground by a pair of palms that he couldn't see clearly. Then, Shueisha kicked the man's abdomen with a seemingly light and floaty kick at the man's waist while his body was moving on the ground. One move. It was the same move, yet Shueisha had severely injured the man. The man's body was pushed back 7 to 8 meters on the ground, and eventually hit the wall. Blood flowed from his head and he directly fainted. What? The thin middle-aged man and his other companion's complexion turned extremely ugly, as though they had eaten a dead fly from their meal. They were nearly angered to death. However, they also realized Shueisha's terrifying power at this moment. The Phantom Special Combat Squad. Mo Xiaonan stared blankly at the enemy who was defeated by Shueisha in one move. He then looked at Wei Qinggang, who had already stood up while trembling. He suddenly touched Chen Yangfan with his arm and said in a low voice, "Tell me I'm dreaming." "It's not a dream." Chen Yangfan tightly clenched his fists. His eyes were full of fanaticism as he fixedly stared at Shueisha. The others, however, looked incredulous with lofty respect faintly mixed in their eyes. They didn't expect that one of Tan Xiao's men could casually stand up and defeat the enemy. Mo Xiaonan pinched his thigh and muttered with a trembling voice, "Just now, Gongzi was defeated by someone in one move. But the one who defeated Gongzi in one move was actually defeated by one of Tan Xiao's men. What does this mean? If Tan Xiao's man wants to deal with Gongzi, I'm afraid it won't be much more difficult than crushing an ant." Shueisha looked at his unconscious opponent with some regret. He then turned to look at Tan Xiao and smilingly said, "Boss, since they want to pick a fight with us, it's better for me to clean them up first. Else, it'll be very annoying if they keep surrounding us like flies." Chapter 733. A smile outlined on the corner of Tan Xiao's mouth. How could he not understand the hidden meaning in Shueisha's words? It was necessary to deal with these guys in front of him, but the most important thing was to make the members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad leave. Otherwise, once those non-humans from the Stygian Club appeared, they would definitely expose their identity as cultivators. "Shueisha, If they have the guts, then you can exercise your muscles. Shueisha nodded with a smile. Then he looked at the Stygian Club's people and proudly said, "My boss said that you flies are very annoying. If you want to show off your strength, then clamp your balls in your crotch and come out. I'll fight all of you alone." The thin middle-aged man's face was gloomy as he fiercely stared at Shueisha. He had the bloodline of a werewolf, so he naturally had great strength. Aside from the experts of his clan around him, the rest of his 7 subordinates were all humans. Although they also practiced strange cultivation techniques, their strength was not particularly strong. It wouldn't be a problem for them to deal with ordinary humans, but they could only be beaten up once they encountered a real alien race powerhouse. However, he had his own pride, and he would never allow his subordinates to be cowards. Although this guy named Shueisha was very strong, it wasn't impossible for his 7 subordinates to fight him if they joined forces. "Go kill him." The thin middle-aged man clenched his fists and shouted. The 7 experts from the Stygian Club were shocked upon hearing his order. The moment they heard Shueisha's words, their hearts were filled with killing intent, and they couldn't wait to get the order to kill him. Whoosh! The 7 men stepped forward and instantly pulled out the sabers tied to their backs from the scabbards. Their neat movements and chilling blades filled the air with an austere aura. Shueisha slightly frowned. Despite being bold and skillful, he was still vigilant. The Everlasting Feast Hall had a unique battle array that could unleash a formidable power, as long as many people cooperated with it. However, these 7 people in front of him had a tacit understanding, and were likely to know how to combine such an array. 7 stars alignment. The 7 people's footsteps suddenly moved. As the sound that came out from the gaps between their teeth faded away, the 7 people turned into afterimages and instantly enveloped Shueisha. Their speed was originally not very fast, but they cooperated with each other. Their sabers constantly collided, and their palms slapped their companions' shoulders in the same order and direction, causing their speed to soar a lot. "You need companions to help you?" Shueisha raised his eyebrows and his dignified expression suddenly changed. A smile appeared in his mind as he instantly threw a dart and accurately hit one of the sabers. It was also at this moment that a gap appeared in the battle formation that borrowed force to accelerate. "Break for me." Like a shadow, Shueisha swept the dagger in his hand along the gaps in the battle formation. With the force of a small force, 2 sabers were bounced off. The dagger in Shueisha's hand seemed to have a life of its own as it stabbed into the left rib of one of the men in a tricky and strange path. "Ah!" Just as the shrill screams were heard, 2 lines of blood appeared on the necks of 2 of them. Along with the opening of their necks, blood spurted wildly. Shueisha was like a tiger entering a flock of sheep. The dagger in his hand kept flying, leaving bloody shadows behind. He was suppressing his speed, yet he was still nearly twice as fast as the people from the Stygian Club. When experts exchanged blows, the advantage of nearly double the speed was definitely a one-sided massacre. 15 seconds. It only took Shueisha 15 seconds to return to Tanxiu after throwing the dart, completely ending the battle. Bam, 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 bam. 7 bodies fell to the ground, convulsing for more than 10 seconds while blood splashed everywhere, and then completely lost their vitality. The thin middle-aged man clenched his fists so hard that they turned white. His eyes flashed with crazy killing intent. A surging aura emanated from him as he stared at Shueisha, as though he would attack at any time. How could this be? That was what he thought. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that of the 8 subordinates he had personally trained, 7 had died and 1 was injured in such a short period of time. The members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad were equally dumbfounded. The moment the 7 Stygian Club members formed their battle formation, they had already realized the strength of the other party. Yet, the 7 of them were unexpectedly killed by Shueisha in such a short time. Such strength and means were definitely much stronger than theirs. Is he still human? Chen Yangfan's mouth twitched a few times as he couldn't help but murmur in a low voice. Suddenly, he recalled the time when he was in Demonic City. The guy who put a dagger on his neck like a ghost. Could it be? Could it be them? Chen Yangfan's pupils instantly shrunk, and his eyes quickly landed on Tanxiu. Tanxiu came from China and set off together from Demonic City. That guy who was as fast as lightning was also in Demonic City at that time. There was definitely a close connection between the two. Having figured it out, Chen Yongfan immediately came to Yu Shuqing's side and whispered, "It's them, Captain." Chen Yongfan's words made Yu Shuqing stare blankly and confused. "What do you mean? Do you still remember when I was tracking mouse and someone put a dagger on my neck?" Chen Yongfan said in a low voice. "I suspect that person was Tan Xiu's man. You've also seen this Shueisha guy's speed. He's too fast." Yu Shuqing's expression slightly changed. After carefully thinking about it, he felt that Chen Yongfan's conjecture was very reasonable. There were a lot of coincidences in it, and if they were to be connected, it should be them. But then, why did Tan Xiu look for mouse? Did he also want to buy intel? Put this matter aside for now. Yu Shuqing could sense that the thin middle-aged man was about to erupt, so he immediately raised his gun and spoke in a low voice. Tan Xiu glanced at the thin middle-aged man with a faint smile and looked satisfied. He then nodded to Shueisha and said, "Well done. Your strength has improved, hasn't it?" "It's a small breakthrough," said Shueisha with a smile. "All right. You don't need to do anything for the rest." Tan Xiu nodded. If these two want to do it themselves, there will be someone to play with them. The thin middle-aged man took a deep breath and directly suppressed his killing intent. Then he said in a deep voice, "We'll give you one last chance now, Tan Xiu. If you agree to go with us, some of your men will die. But don't blame us for being ruthless if you still insist on going your own way." "I, Tan Xiu, am afraid of anything but threats." Tan Xiu laughed. "Bring it on if you have the ability. But once you expose something that shouldn't be exposed in front of ordinary people, I'm afraid this matter will quickly spread out. It'll be very difficult for you to clean up the mess by then. No one will know if ordinary people die," said the thin middle-aged man with a murderous aura. As his voice faded away, the middle-aged man beside him instantly pounced towards the 7 members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad. Before he could reach Yu Shuqing, who was at the forefront, his wolf teeth were exposed, and his eyes had already turned green. Even on his originally dark skin, strands of hair continuously drilled out, and at a speed visible to the naked eye, he turned into a humanoid beast. Wolf. Stimulating one's bloodline could temporarily cause one's strength to double. Tang Xiu had seen a werewolf in Mount Lao who had stimulated his bloodline to return to its ancestral state, so he didn't feel anything strange about it. The 7 members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad, however, were shocked by the werewolf's transformation. At this moment, except for Yu Shuqing, who could still pull the trigger and shoot subconsciously, the rest were all dumbfounded. Slash. Moao's burly figure instantly dashed forward and unleashed his immortal sword. The moment the werewolf's sharp claws were about to tear Yu Shuqing's head, he fiercely slashed the sharp claws. As blood splashed on Yu Shuqing's face, the werewolf's other sharp claws swept 4 bloody wounds on Yu Shuqing's chest. Roar! The skinny middle-aged man's body also changed. As the clothes on his back were torn apart, 2 wings instantly spread out, and a dark red feather crown grew on his forehead. Flames instantly shot out from his eyes. At the same time, the feathers on the 2 wings shot out one by one, covering the sky and shooting toward Tan Xiu and Shueisha. The flames touched the feathers and formed a fire arrow. Even the surrounding temperature suddenly soared at this moment. Whoosh! 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 8 figures instantly appeared in front of Tan Xiu. Together with Shueisha, they unleashed their flying swords. When the sky was filled with layers of sword shadows, the fire arrows were instantly smashed. The swift and fierce sword chi formed a sword net, pouncing toward the thin middle-aged man who had transformed into a winged man, a cultivator from Wuxia. The winged man's complexion changed dramatically. As if he had realized something, his figure instantly retreated. When he appeared behind Moao, his wings turned into light blades and fiercely swept toward the back of Moao's neck. "You're courting death." Moao's cultivation was the highest among them except for Tan Xiu. Feeling the wind coming from behind him, he instantly rushed toward the werewolf. The flying swords rotated and strangled the werewolf, forcing him to retreat to the middle of Yu Shuqing and the others. Tut, tut, tut. The muzzles of the 7 guns spat out fire snakes. The bullets were fired as if they were free, and most of the bullets shot into the werewolf's body. Roar! The winged man suddenly roared and grabbed a syringe from his waist. The moment he fiercely smashed it toward Mo. The two pairs of wings instantly disappeared without a trace, and the silver-red feather crown on his forehead directly dissipated. As his eyeballs turned dark green, hair drilled out of his body, and sharp claws grew wildly from his fingers. He who was originally a winged man, unexpectedly turned into a werewolf in just a few breaths. What a strange change! Although Tan Xiu was experienced and knowledgeable, he was still shocked and tongue-tied. A winged man has turned into a werewolf? What kind of monster is this? Tan Xiu took a deep breath. At this moment he brazenly made a move. The long sword suspended in the Dantian world was instantly unleashed by him. In an instant, it turned into a flowing light and pierced the guy's back. Run! A roar came from the monster whose heart had been pierced. Chapter 734. The monster that had turned from a wingman into a werewolf endured the fatal injury, and dashed to the front of Mo with its powerful body. It unleashed a suicidal attack and crazily rushed toward Mo. The other werewolf, whose claw had been cut off, instantly fled outside. Catch them! Tan Xiu instantly retrieved his flying sword and shouted fiercely. Mo roared and bombarded the monster's face with a fist full of tyrannical aura. The sharp claws tore open 8 bloody wounds on his body. At this moment, the flying sword he unleashed flew back and directly cut off the monster's head. Whoosh! Whoosh! 10 figures flickered lightning fast and chased after the fleeing werewolf. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared from the hotel's entrance. The gunshots had stopped. The Phantom Special Combat Squad's captain, Yu Shuqing, and the other 6 members of the squad retreated at the same time. Their backs leaned against the wall as they looked at the headless corpse in front of them with lingering fear. In this lifetime, they had seen countless battles and participated in countless battles, but none of them could compare to this one. Even if they were just bystanders this time, they were just bystanders. These monsters! Mo Xiaonan wiped the blood that splashed on his face and murmured in a trembling voice. In the past, he always thought that as long as he had a gun in his hand, he wouldn't be afraid even if the devil appeared in front of him. But just now he was scared out of his wits. Cough, cough, they're like the werewolves and birdmen in the movies. Yu Shuqing wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, but he didn't bother to deal with the bleeding wound on his chest. His eyes were full of vigilance, and the muzzle of his gun was aimed at the hotel's entrance. Tan Xiu came to Mo's side, and looked at the wound on his chest. He then took out a holy healing pill and stuffed it into his mouth. Then he said in a deep voice, "Your main task is to heal yourself. Hurry up and heal. I'm afraid there will be a lot of fights coming up." Mo nodded without a word and directly walked to the corner, and sat cross-legged. Tan Xiu came to Yu Shuqing and lightly said, "Deal with your injuries. Those Stygian Club's heretics are not people you can deal with. So, as I said before, I really don't need your protection. As long as you can protect yourselves, that's already the greatest help you can give me." The faces of Yu Shuqing and the other members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad alternated between green and white, and thick shame lingered in their hearts. Previously, when Tan Xiu said that he didn't need their protection, they thought that Tan Xiu was too arrogant and reckless. Only now did they understand that they weren't courting death at all. They were simply looking down on them. People. He was looking down on them. Yu Shuqing and the others looked at each other. Apart from a bitter smile and helplessness, there was only a strong sense of humiliation surging in their hearts. Their pride, their complacency, and their self-confidence had all been crushed to smithereens. Tan Xiu did not say anything more to provoke them. After all, they were all ordinary people, and they were once true warriors who dedicated themselves to the country. Gently patting Yu Shuqing's shoulder, Tan Xiu said, "Miss Source Island is now beset with crisis everywhere, and the garrison is facing a huge crisis. I think you should stay in the garrison base with your ability. As for the foreign forces on Miss Source Island, just leave them to me." Yu Shuqing was silent for a moment and said with difficulty, "I'll explain the situation to Division Commander Yang and Chief of Staff Hu. As long as they issue the order, We'll immediately return to the garrison base. Tanshio shook his head and said, No need to report to them. I'll explain it to them personally later. However, there's one thing I hope you can do me a favor. What favor? Asked Yu Shuqing quickly. Keep it a secret, said Tanshio. Whatever you see today must not be spread out, let alone reported to your superiors. I know you're loyal and patriotic soldiers, but you must accept orders. Yu Shuqing fell into silence. With a complicated expression, Emo Xiaonan said, You mean we must accept your orders? A secret order? That's right, said Tanshio indifferently. We're just temporarily obeying your orders, but we have no responsibility, said Emo Xiaonan. Tanshio raised his hand to interrupt him and coldly said, There are some things I didn't want to say, but it seems that I can only warn you now. The one who sent me to Miss Source Island this time is the #1 leader of the country. Who do you think has more power than him in the entire country? Also, I'll tell you one more thing. Maybe I wouldn't have come if it was just the #1 leader. You've just heard what my enemies said about my identity. As cultivators, what we pursue is power and longevity. We comprehend the heavenly Tao laws and cultivate the heart sword that cuts off the mortal world. But this time, aside from the #1 leader, my grandfather also came to ask me to come here. I don't need to hide it from you. Tang Guosheng is my grandfather, and the Tang family in the imperial capital is my family. Do you think it's necessary to report what happened today? All the members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad looked at each other in dismay with shock on their faces. Never in their dreams did they expect that it was the #1 leader who sent Tanshio here, much less that he was Tang Guosheng's grandson. No wonder the two leaders sent you to solve the crisis on Miss Source Island. As cultivators, I'm afraid only you can deal with the foreign races. We'll treat this matter as a top military secret. Unless the #1 leader asks, we'll never divulge half a word about it, said Yu Shuqing solemnly. Tanshio slightly nodded and said, Let's stay here for the time being tonight. There are many dangers outside, and I'm afraid the news of us coming here has already been known by many forces. If my guess is correct, I'm afraid it won't be peaceful tonight. Who are you? Two middle-aged men in security uniforms came out from the side corridor of the hall. They had flashlights in their hands and a confused look on their faces. However, when the security guard on the left asked, he suddenly exclaimed in horror, Oh God! Murder! There are dead people here. His voice faded away. The two men ran away with fear written all over their faces. Nearly exhausting all their strength, they quickly disappeared into the corridor. Tanshio couldn't help laughing and said, You go with them and solve the problem here. I'll stand outside for a while, and then come back to take us to our rooms. Understood. Yu Shuqing nodded. Tanshio took out a cigarette, lit it up, and walked out of the hotel's entrance. He looked at the empty night outside, and constantly spread his spiritual sense to the surroundings. With his current ability, it wouldn't be a problem for him to release it up to 500 to 600 meters away. However, what made him slightly worried was that Xue Sha, Jin Shi, and the others had gone to chase the werewolf and had disappeared from the range of his spiritual sense. Don't worry, boss. Even if Jin Shi and the others encounter danger, they can still escape if they can't beat the enemy. Using flying swords to escape is the fastest. Apart from some skin wounds, Mo didn't have any major problems. His bloody wounds had also healed a lot at this moment. I've always had a bad feeling about this, but I can't tell why. Tanshio shook his head. Also, the guy we just killed is a bit strange. You mean he showed the characteristics of a winged man at first, but then suddenly turned into a werewolf? Asked Mo. That's right, answered Tanshio. After hesitating for a moment, Mo said, I think it should be caused by a potion, boss. That monster hit me with a syringe, and I found some residual green liquid inside the syringe. After I killed it, I examined its body. There was a tiny needle hole in its lower ribs, and there was some dark green residue in its body. If it's really caused by a potion, then it's really interesting, said Tanshio with a strange expression. A werewolf can turn into a winged man, which means that the Western foreign races are not at peace. Oh, don't you think that if such a potion really exists, It's the best way to frame someone after an assassination? Indeed. Mo let out a hollow laugh. Suddenly, both of them looked to the southeast at the same time. Aside from the 10 figures flying fast on flying swords, there were also pursuers behind them. For vampires flapped their wings and held strange weapons in their hands, bombarding them with terrifying attacks again and again. Oh, go support them. Tan Xiao instantly soared into the sky. The moment the longsword in his body was unleashed, he brushed past his 10 fleeing subordinates. Immediately after, he raised his arm high and the longsword turned into a 100-meter-long light shadow, fiercely slashing toward the 4 pursuing vampires. The earth-shattering sword seemed to tear open the barrier of space. Countless types of energy swarmed in from all directions, merging into the lightning-fast sword shadow. In 1/100th of a second, the power of this sword had increased by several times. Retreat. A sharp roar came from the mouth of one of the vampires, and his tone was filled with intense panic. In an instant, the 4 vampires frantically retreated. Puff, 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 puff. Their speed was very fast, but the lightning-fast sword shadow was even faster. With an overwhelming momentum, it instantly slashed the 4 vampires who were blocking with their weapons. The 4 vampires were like a lone boat in a turbulent sea. They spurted blood and were sent flying hundreds of meters away, smashing large holes in several buildings. Ghost miasma. A vampire rushed out of the broken building and sprayed out a pitch-black smoke. In just a few breaths, the black smoke frantically spread and enveloped the scenery within a radius of half a kilometer. The 4 vampires then drilled into the dark warrior's body and disappeared. Tan Xiao tightly frowned. He found that his spiritual sense was blocked when it came into contact with the black mist. With no other choice, he could only retract his spiritual sense, and quickly circled to another direction to chase the place where the 4 vampires disappeared. A few minutes later, Tan Xiao returned to the hotel's entrance. He looked at Jin Shi and the others, who looked quite distressed. Tan Xiao frowned and asked, "What's the origin of those 4 vampires?" Chapter 735. Tan Xiao's all-out attack failed to directly kill the 4 vampires and only heavily injured them. Tan Xiao was somewhat shocked. He had learned about the classification of vampires from Shanjena. Therefore, he inferred that the 4 vampires were at least at the count rank. A count? Shanjena once told him that there were no more than 20 vampires in the entire Western vampire race who could reach the count rank. But today, 4 of them appeared all of a sudden, causing Tan Xiao to be more cautious. They should belong to the Stygian Club boss. We had already heavily injured that werewolf, but he was saved by those 4 vampires, said Jin Shi bitterly. Tan Xiao slowly nodded and said, "Those 4 vampires are very powerful. If I don't use some of my trump cards, it will be very difficult for me to severely injure or kill them. Our real enemies have now appeared, so we must be careful in our next actions. Otherwise, we're likely to die on this Miss Source Island." Understood. Everyone replied with a solemn expression. Immediately after, Tan Xiao led everyone back to the hotel, whereas Yu Shuqing led the members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad to find the current manager of the hotel, a pale middle-aged man. "Mr. Tang, the room is ready. You can check in at any time. This is the room card," said Yu Shuqing respectfully as he handed over a stack of room cards. Tan Xiao ignored the hotel manager. He took the room card, found the room, and then directly stayed there. In the forest outside the city, dozens of kilometers away from the hotel, 4 vampires with one of their wings cut off were hiding in the bushes with lingering fear. Meanwhile, the heavily injured werewolf was struggling and roaring in front of the 4 vampires. However, all the blood essence in his body was completely devoured by the 4 vampires in just half a minute, causing him to die directly. Damn it. One of the vampires wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and kicked the werewolf's shriveled body away. Then he angrily said, "That bastard is too strong. We're not his match even if the 4 of us join forces. Hence, the possibility of capturing him is 0. Another vampire with bloody eyes said, "He's a Chinese cultivator. Legend has it that he's the descendant of the Immortals of the Middle East, and has mysterious and unfathomable abilities. Back then, during the Crusades, they were beaten miserably by the Eastern cultivators. I didn't expect that we would actually encounter cultivators from the East. We need to report this matter to the leader. I saw it. A hazy black shadow suddenly appeared. It was a pale-faced young man dressed entirely in black. His two fangs were sharp, and his entire body was emitting a sinister wind. In his hand, there was a black metal sphere. His cold and indifferent expression didn't fluctuate in the slightest as his blood-red eyes swept over the dead werewolf corpse dozens of meters away. Leader. The four vampires knelt and bowed. Bowles was the name of the young vampire. He was also a trusted subordinate of Keith Moore, one of the 8 bigwigs of the Stygian Club. We must complete Lord Keith Moore's order without hesitation, even if it means sacrificing our lives to Ancestor Cain. The Eastern cultivator, Tan Xiao, is indeed very strong. That sword attack of his was very powerful. Even if I was hit by it, I would probably be severely injured. Hence, there's only one way to capture him alive, and that's to use blood poison. Having said that, Bowles took out a porcelain bottle and handed it to one of the vampires, saying, "You're to move in the dark and put the blood poison in his food without him noticing. Even if he's an Eastern cultivator, his power will be imprisoned for a short time once he eats the food with blood poison, turning him into a powerless reptile." The four vampires stared at the porcelain bottle with fear in their eyes. As bloodkin, they were naturally aware of the power of the blood poison. Even if they were vampire-level powerhouses, their power would be weakened by half once they were poisoned by the blood poison. As for the other races, they would lose all their power once they were poisoned. Even if they could live for a few more days, they would still die without a doubt. "We'll definitely accomplish the mission, leader," the vampire holding the porcelain bottle said solemnly. "According to the intelligence I got, Wisdom War Elder Wuxia, one of the pyramid's 10 war elders, has recently sent his men to secretly study the antidote for the darkening virus. Once his men succeed in their research, it will greatly affect our plan. According to His Excellency's deduction, Wisdom War Elder Wuxia will definitely send his men to obstruct our operation to capture Tan Xiao. Pay attention to the pyramid's people when you carry out the mission, and kill them immediately once you find them." Understood. The four vampires' complexions slightly changed, and they replied with a murderous aura. At the Grand Hyatt Hotel, Tan Xiao sat cross-legged on the bed and silently practiced the heavenly art of cosmic genesis. With the changes in the space in his dantian, the primal chaos force he possessed had become more massive. If he used it continuously before, he would only be able to use it for 2 hours. But now he could definitely use it for more than 10 hours. However, after this change, he also found that it was quite a headache for him. It would be much more difficult for him to increase his physical strength in the future, and he would need to absorb more star force. He couldn't even see the end of it. After all, the world in his dantian was very big with hundreds of millions of planets. If each of them were to grow to the size of a real planet in the universe, he wouldn't be able to do it even after 10,000 years with his current cultivation speed. I originally thought that I would be invincible on Earth after cultivating the heavenly art of cosmic genesis to the peak of the viscera transformation stage. But I didn't expect that there are not only other cultivators on Earth, but also vampires and beastmen with terrifying strength. Since a vampire count's strength was on par with mine, a vampire marquis's strength would probably be on par with mine. In case I encounter a vampire duke or even a higher-level vampire lord, I'm afraid I have no other way but to escape. Tan Xiao opened his eyes, got out of bed, and walked to the window. He looked at the faint light in the sky outside and pondered in silence. He had a lot of means to fight and escape, but even if he could escape alive in front of a real powerhouse, he would most likely be injured. Not to mention, he also brought Mo and the others to Miss Source Island. If he really encountered danger, he would never abandon Mo and the others and escape alone. Therefore, time to refine an array disk. Tan Xiao closed the curtains, took out a large number of jade materials from the interspatial ring, and began to refine an array disk. Currently, his strength was very low, and he was still unable to set up a powerful formation in a very short period of time. Only with the help of a formation plate could he form a powerful formation in an instant, which could be used to trap or kill the enemy. For 2 days, Tan Xiu didn't eat, drink, or sleep. He went all out to refine array discs. In these 2 days he refined a total of 50 array discs, among which the most powerful was the Star Glory array. Tan Xiu was confident that even if he encountered a vampire duke, he could kill him with the help of this array. Pa! The door was closed by Tan Xiu. As he stepped out of the corridor, he saw Mo, Jin Shi, and the others sitting cross-legged on the floor. After they got up, Tan Xiu asked, "Did the Phantom Special Combat Squad leave?" "They haven't left yet. They said they'll go back after we leave," said Mo. "Then let's go," Tan Xiu said. "Let's bypass the mixed summit city and go to that mountain. If there are people following us, we'll let them follow us as long as they don't attack us." "Aren't we going to solve it directly?" Mo was confused. "Don't you think it's better to kill enemies in the deep mountains and forests than in the city?" Tan Xiu said. Mo stared blankly for a moment before he immediately understood Tan Xiu's meaning and said, "You don't want to expose your identity in front of ordinary people, boss. We know what to do." Shortly after, everyone came to the lobby on the first floor. When Tan Xiu saw Yu Shuqing and the others waiting there, he immediately said, "Don't forget what we said before. I'll treat your Phantom Special Combat Squad to a drink when we go back. We'll prepare a banquet and wait for your triumphant return," said Yu Shuqing quickly. Tan Xiu let out a faint smile and strode out of the hotel's entrance. At this moment, the feeling of being monitored arose spontaneously again. However, he ignored it and didn't even release his spiritual sense to observe. After sitting in the cars, the 4 cars quickly left. After 2 hours of travel, the 4 cars had bypassed the mixed summit city and were only a dozen kilometers away from the mountain in the center of Mist Source Island. From here, they could vaguely see the mountain shrouded in clouds and mist more than 10 kilometers away. However, the summit was shrouded in clouds and mist, so they couldn't see the majestic palace. "Boss, there are 2 groups of people following us from both sides." After a long time of observation, Mo, who was driving, finally couldn't help but report, "Let them continue to follow us." Tan Xiu sneered. "I'd like to see what their ultimate purpose is." Mo nodded and sped up a lot at this moment. With the passage of time, they soon came to a place a few kilometers away from the foot of the mountain. "How high is this mountain?" After getting off the car, Tan Xiu looked up at the mountain and asked. "We've visually measured it before, but the result was very helpless. There's no way to visually estimate the exact height, but we can infer that it's at least a kilometer high," said Zidane. Tan Xiu looked at the mist shrouding the mountainside to the foot of the mountain. While the mountainside to the mountaintop was clearly visible, a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. The mountain was indeed shrouded by a huge array, and this array was very mysterious. Even if he hadn't entered it before, he couldn't see through the mystery of this array. "Leave the car here and follow me. We'll try to go in." "Boss, I'm afraid we can't go in for the time being." Mo's eyes were full of killing intent as he stared at the left rear. He instantly unleashed his flying sword and it kept hovering around him. Chapter 736. As Tang Xiu looked around, his killing intent instantly soared. 5 lightning-fast figures were approaching them from the edge of the woods a kilometer away, as though they were sharp arrows. In just a few breaths, they had already arrived in front of them. "Mr. Tang." Basil's ice-cold eyes fell on Tan Xiu, but his heart was full of annoyance. After 2 days of surveillance, the members of Spectre Squad under his control were still unable to poison Tan Xiu's food, even though they had sneaked into the Grand Hyatt Hotel. It was because Tan Xiu hadn't eaten or drunk anything in the past 2 days. Tan Xiu observed the 4 vampires behind Basil and instantly recognized them. They were the ones who chased Jin Shi and the others 2 days ago, and were forced to retreat by his sword. Now it seemed that their injuries had actually healed. "Are you also members of the Stygian Club?" Basil's every movement was noble and elegant. His slender and fair fingers fiddled with the metal ball in his hand as he nodded and said, "We're the subordinates of Sir Keith Moore of the Stygian Club. The previous assassin was too rude to Mr. Tang, So we've already killed the werewolf who escaped. Mr. Tang, our lord wants to see you. I hope you can give us face and come with us. He wants me to go with him just because he wants to see me, huh? Tan Xiu sneered. How dare he be so arrogant in our Chinese territory? He's really asking to be taught a lesson. You can go now. Tell that guy to come here if he wants to see me. I can see him if I'm in a good mood. Basil's fingers fiddling with the metal ball instantly stopped. Killing intent flashed in his ice-cold eyes as he coldly said, Mr. Tang, I know you're all Eastern cultivators. But I've seen the strength of your men before. They can't even beat my Spectre squad. You do have some skills, but I'm afraid it's not enough to look at me. So, please come with us if you don't want us to drink the blood of you and your men. Are you threatening me? Tan Xiu sneered and said, Oh, replace Dan Dan and arrange the 10-direction sword array. I'll deal with this brat myself if he dares to move. Yes. Mo Jin sure, and the others stepped forward one after another. The flying swords hovering around them instantly shot out. Basil's eyes were filled with disdain as he retreated 100 meters in an instant. As for the 4 vampires, they licked their lips and laughed maniacally. As the long blades on their backs were unsheathed, the 4 divine weapons of the Blood Clan, the dark magic blade, emitted a dark glow. A loser. A vampire earl sneered. He spread his wings and dashed in front of Mo. He raised his sword and slashed at Mo. Set up the formation. Mo didn't panic in the face of danger. With a loud shout, the flying sword instantly entangled with the other 9 flying swords. Mo's figure disappeared in a flash and soared into the sky with Jin Shi and the others. They stepped on the void, and their figures became dreamy and illusory, drifting erratically, killing body drinking blood. The 4 vampires soared into the sky. Their strength was faintly stronger than Jin Shi and the others, so the 4 dark magic blades slashed through the sky in an attempt to kill the 10 people. Basil, who stood 100 meters away, revealed a smile in his eyes. 2 days ago, his 4 Spectre subordinates were able to chase and beat up Tan Xiu's men. But now, in his opinion, it was Tan Xiu's men who would eventually be killed. Even if one of them was replaced, the outcome was already doomed. He couldn't understand it. Why was Tan Xiu so stupid? Didn't he see the miserable appearance of his subordinates in the battle 2 days ago? A kilometer away, more than a dozen men and women hiding in the woods on the other side could clearly see the beginning of the battle. Shu was clenching a dagger, but his face was full of excitement. Big brother Shu, it seems we were right not to act immediately. Now that Basil has led his Spectre team to attack, we can just sit back and reap the benefits, whispered a cute girl in a black leather coat with a smile on her face. You're right. Shu nodded and smilingly said, no matter who wins and who loses, both sides will end up with a lose-lose situation. We'll be the last one to appear, and we can easily get rid of them all. Hee hee. The War Wisdom Elder will give us a lot of rewards for our contribution. I can't wait to see both of them suffer a lose-lose situation. The girl giggled. But who do you think will win, big brother Shu? It's Basil's team, of course, said Shu. Haven't you noticed? Basil's Spectre companion, Ality, hasn't appeared yet. You must know that Ality's strength is even stronger than Basil. The smile on the girl's face receded like a receding tide. Her eyes were filled with hatred as she said, Ality, that damned vampire bastard. He was the one who captured me and imprisoned me in the blood pool for 14 years. He destroyed my metal ability and killed my elder sister. Today, I'm going to kill him with my own hands and burn his soul with the hellfire. Shu grabbed the girl's arm and whispered, Don't release your aura, else they will sense it. All right. The girl suppressed her hatred and nodded heavily. Near the mountain shrouded in clouds and mist, 10 hazy silhouettes flickered constantly. 10 flying swords transformed into thousands of sword shadows, layer upon layer like a blooming lotus of sword light. When the 4 devil saber shadows slashed down, the lotus of sword light instantly broke away from them and collided with the saber light. BM. 2 surging auras instantly erupted with a deafening roar. As the lotus of sword shattered, the 4 demonic blades also became very fragile. Yet the blades were still spreading upward. The collision showed that the 4 vampires had the upper hand. However, The situation reversed 360 degrees in the blink of an eye. Another wave of lotus of swords separated and directly collided with the demonic blade's lights. Watch out! The four vampires' complexions slightly changed. They twisted their bodies in a strange manner and abruptly moved several meters in the air, dodging the lotus of swords that continued to rush down after the demonic blade's lights dissipated. Fall! Immortal roared. The decagon sword array, which had been completely formed, instantly fell down and enveloped the four vampires. One after another, lotus of swords appeared out of thin air and floated toward the four vampire counts. Damn it! What the hell is this? One of the vampire counts smashed two lotus of swords, but more lotus flowers stained his body. Blood splattered all over his body as a ghastly wound appeared on his body. The other three vampires also encountered the same problem. As the number of lotus flowers increased, more and more wounds appeared on their bodies. Even their flapping wings were wounded, and their speed slowed down a lot in just a dozen seconds. Joint attack. One of the vampires roared and instantly gathered with the other three vampires. The dark magic blade in their hands crazily slashed out and smashed hundreds of lotus swords in one breath. You're courting death. Immortal coldly snorted and instantly dashed to the front of a vampire. His flying sword pierced the vampire's chest, and he kicked the vampire away with his foot. The next moment, Jean Sher's figure also instantly appeared. His flying sword pierced a vampire's throat and directly penetrated it as his palm slapped the vampire's forehead. Shuasha also. Puff, puff, puff. Amidst the flashing figures of the 10 people, the three-dimensional sword array composed of lotus swords brought great damage to the four vampires again and again. Several of the wounds were absolutely fatal to the four vampires. Obliterate. Immortal's group of 10 finally stopped attacking and instantly grabbed their respective flying swords. The moment they surrounded the four vampires, they slashed down lightning fast. Argh! Shrill screams came from the mouths of the four vampires. Two of the vampire counts were even dismembered by the sword light at this moment. Pieces of mince flesh fell to the ground, and blood splattered like rain. As for the other two vampire counts, one of them had his heart core shattered, and his body was drenched in blood as he fell to the ground. He had completely lost his breath. Only the other vampire count fell to the ground, barely breathing, and sent up layers of dust. How is this possible? Basil was stunned by the tragic battle situation, and was even more shocked by the result of the fight. He was confident that his four subordinates could kill all of Tan Xiu's men. Who would have thought that the result would turn out like this? He was distressed. His heart ached so much that it was bleeding. It must be noted that the four vampire counts under his command were his most powerful subordinates, and also the reason why he could have a higher status in the Stygian club. Otherwise, with just his own strength and the two companion brothers, he definitely wouldn't be valued as much as he was now. Whoosh! 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 Immortal's group of 10 landed from the sky, and neatly stood in front of Tan Xiu. Apart from being stained with the blood of the four vampires, they didn't suffer any injuries. Well done. Tan Xiu applauded. Vampire counts are just SOSO. Basil flashed and dashed to the side of the only surviving subordinate who was riddled with scars. He felt a bit better after checking the man's injuries. Although the man's injuries were severe, his heart core was not shattered and there was still hope for him to survive. At this moment, Tang Xiu instantly appeared behind Immortal's group of 10. As he unsheathed his longsword, an earth-shattering power instantly burst out and fiercely slashed toward Basil and the injured vampire count. After absorbing the energy of heaven and earth, the 100-meter long sword shadow became even more powerful. With just one strike, Basil's complexion crazily changed. His figure instantly disappeared 100 meters away, whereas the subordinate he couldn't save in time was slashed into two halves. Despite escaping fast enough, Basil's back was hit by the sword energy, leaving several bloody wounds that looked hideous and terrible. Buzz! A hazy shadow swept past Tang Xiu's body. Tan Xiu's pupils shrunk. The invisible crisis made his hair stand up in an instant. Relying on his superhuman perception, he didn't have the time to release his spiritual sense, and fiercely swept the sword in his hand to the left. Chapter 737. The two forces collided invisibly, causing Tan Xiu's body to fly tens of meters sideways before he staggered and stabilized himself. In another direction, a vampire dressed in a black knight suit revealed himself. Even his arm was badly mutilated by the sword aura from the collision just now. So strong. Aladi's wings were splashed by the sword energy, and the pain nearly suffocated him. After flying backward for tens of meters, he immediately fled far away. He wouldn't have such a feeling if it was a frontal confrontation. He just launched a sneak attack, and Tan Xiu's counterattack didn't even use his full strength. Aladi, how is it? Basil flew to Aladi's side with a horrified expression. His heart twitched a few times when he saw the man's badly mutilated arm. Aladi shot a deep look at Tan Xiu's direction and bitterly said, "That guy's not human at all. He's way too powerful. That sword strike of his is almost comparable to Sir Keith Moore's. Let's retreat. I'm afraid only Sir Keith Moore can defeat him." Basil was full of unwillingness, yet he couldn't refute Aladi's words. He knew that Aladi was telling the truth. Even if he and Aladi joined forces, they wouldn't be that guy's match. "Let's go." The two figures didn't stay and instantly bolted in the direction they came from. In the mountain forest a kilometer away, Su was dumbfounded as he watched the scene ahead. He never dreamed that such an ending would happen. Just a moment ago he vowed that the Stygian Club Spectre team would win. But in just a short time, the 4 vampires of the Spectre team were slaughtered. Even the Spectre team's leader, Basil, was forced to retreat. Even Basil's companion, Aladi, was defeated. It was just like an invisible slap on his face. Could it be that the strength of Eastern cultivators was really that strong? Su's throat was a bit dry. Such an ending made him at a loss. He had more than a dozen men with him. If he were to fight Basil's vampires, the odds of him winning or losing would only be 50-50. But now even Basil's 4 men were beheaded, and even Basil and Aladi had to flee in panic. Even if he brought his men there, he wouldn't be able to gain any advantage, right? What to do? Was he supposed to leave just like that? Were they really going to give up on the mission Lord Wuxia had given them? The cute girl standing beside Siwu clenched her fists tightly, and her eyes almost spat fire. She hadn't expected things to turn out like this. She hadn't expected that damned vampire Aladi to run away so shamelessly. She wanted to kill Aladi. She wanted nothing more than to grind his bones to dust. But now that he'd escaped, she couldn't do anything to him. Siwu, who was in a dilemma, suddenly brightened his eyes. He keenly saw that Tan Xiu, who was surrounded by his men, spat out a mouthful of blood. What did this mean? This meant that Tan Xiu was injured, and his injury was very serious. A chance. Siwu made up his mind and said in a deep voice, "Earthwalker Moas, each of you bring 2 people to approach them from underground. You must injure some enemies when they are caught off guard. Shadowless, follow behind King Kong and the rest and seize the opportunity to sneak an attack on Tan Xiu. Even if you can't kill him with 1 strike, you must injure him more severely. Hei Feng and the other 2 follow me." In the distance, Tan Xiu coughed out a mouthful of blood. His eyes casually glanced at the direction where Siwu and the rest were hiding. With his vigilance, he had long known that there were other forces besides the Stygian Club's people following them. Tan Xiu had even speculated where they were hiding. He didn't suffer any injury, and he deliberately forced the blood out. Aladi's sneak attack only made his arm numb, and the blood in his body churn. In just a few seconds he had already recovered to his original state. Watch out for the enemies. Tang Xiu took advantage of the moment when he was surrounded and quickly reminded them. Mo Ao and the rest had long known that there were 2 groups of people following them. Upon hearing Tan Xiu's warning, they immediately realized that there was another group of people who had yet to appear. Feng Yang was a core expert of the Everlasting Feast Hall. The reason why he was chosen by Guyan was that he had a good aptitude and talent. On the other hand, he had a special ability. Except for a few people in the Everlasting Feast Hall who knew about this special ability, the rest were all dead. He could manipulate the earth element and use the earth attribute ability. Just as everyone saw figures dashing over from a kilometer away, Feng Yang's complexion suddenly changed and he hurriedly said, "Some people are coming from underground. They should be Earth attribute ability users. Ability users? Heaven and Earth's favorite? Tan Xiu's eyes lit up. Although he had seen ability users before, he had never studied them in depth. In a flash, he quickly grabbed 4 array discs and threw them out at an extremely fast speed. As the array patterns were instantly shot out, the 4 divisions array was arranged by him in just 2 breaths. Fengyang, do you know about Earth attribute ability users? Tan Xiu stared at the 10 people dashing over with dense killing intent flashing in his eyes. He could sense the killing intent coming from them, and knew that they didn't come with good intentions. I'm an Earth attribute ability user, boss, said Fengyang. Tan Xiu stared blankly for a moment, and then looked at Fengyang with a slightly surprised expression. He nodded and said, Fengyang, you and Shueisha cooperate with Fengyang. I'm going to make those Earth attribute ability users stay here. Remember to capture them alive if you can. If you can't, just kill them. Fengyang said with a confident smile. I guarantee that I'll complete the task. Don't be anxious. If they want to fight with us, they must enter the 4 divisions array, said Tan Xiu. You know the 4 divisions array, so you'll have the upper hand in fighting the enemy inside. Remember, escape immediately once you're injured. I don't want to see anyone die in battle. Mo Au and the others didn't speak. Their task was to kill the enemy. They couldn't decide whether they would live or die in battle. However, they felt very warm toward Boss Tan Xiu's words. After getting along with him for such a long time, they had figured out Tan Xiu's temperament. He was extremely ruthless to the enemy, but he was very protective of his own people. They felt that following such a boss was worth it even if they had to give their lives to him. Kill. Siwoo's special ability was electricity. As the word kill came out of his mouth, an electric current appeared out of thin air, like burning arrows shooting toward Tan Xiu and the others. At his side, a man and 2 women unleashed their respective special abilities. Crystal clear ice arrows, orange metal arrows, and churning fire dragons were shot toward Tang Xiu, Mo Au, and the rest in an overwhelming manner. 7 stars sword array. Jin Shi roared and instantly formed the 7 stars sword array with the other 6 people. Layers of overlapping sword images filled the world in front of them, carrying an overbearing and sharp aura as they collided with the electric current, ice arrows, metal arrows, and fire dragons. Boom! The 7 people's bodies shook violently. The 7 star sword array also became a bit messy, and the array was almost shattered. Siwoo's group of 4 spurted out a mouthful of blood and flew backward. The power of the 4 of them was scattered, while the power of Jin Shi's group of 7 was superimposed. Therefore, Siwoo's group of 4 suffered a small loss in the confrontation. Array activate. A cold light flashed in Tan Xiu's eyes as he activated the 4 symbols array without hesitation. As Siwoo's group of 4 flew backward, their backs slammed heavily on the invisible energy shield. The 4 symbols array had a total of 4 characteristics: entrapment, attack, hallucination, and blessing. Unless one was proficient in the 4 symbols array, once one fell into it, not only would he suffer from 2 forms of attack, but he would also be trapped inside, unable to withdraw from the array. In addition, as long as the person controlling the 4 symbols array made a move, he could also bless his own people in the array. This kind of powerful 4 symbols array was very common in the immortal world, but it was completely different on Earth. Tan Xiu had studied the 4 symbols array on Earth. It was so crude that one could not bear to look at it. Usually, it was just 4 people joining forces and changing their positions to attack in a cycle. One advanced while the other retreated. It was endless, mysterious, and powerful. It was infinitely mysterious and powerful. In Tan Xiu's eyes, this situation in the eyes of modern people was extremely ridiculous. Boom, boom, boom. The ground was suddenly torn open by the 6 figures. Earth arrows shot out, and weapons made of earth instantly attacked Fengyang, Mo Au, and Shueisha, who had revealed themselves. Moreover, there were even sharp wind blades, water swords, and fire snakes mixed within them. Counterattack. Fengyang's muscles trembled. As the fight for the thick earth began, the earth arrows suddenly stopped, and the weapons made of earth also stopped instantly. In an instant, the earth arrows changed direction, and the weapons made of earth also attacked the surroundings. The wind blades were destroyed, the water swords were scattered, and the fire snakes twisted and dissipated. Earthwalker, Mose, and the other 4 ability users, who rushed up from the ground, were instantly caught unprepared by this change. At this moment, Mo and Shueisha brazenly attacked. Their flying swords were as fast as meteors, and while the 6 people were in a panic, they took away streaks of blood. Block it! Earthwalker and Mose roared at the same time. Suddenly, an earth wall blocked in front of the 2 people. The other 4 people were not so lucky. The defense they used in a hurry was penetrated in an instant. 2 flying swords pierced through their chests and swept across their necks. In a hundredth of a second, the 4 people were killed on the spot. Tanshio stood at the eye of the 4 symbols formation, looking at Su and the others who suddenly became like headless flies. A smile appeared on his face. In terms of strength and mysterious talent, these people were very powerful. If not for the 4 symbols formation, they would be even more difficult to deal with than the vampires. What a pity. They had found the wrong enemy this time. Tanshio's eyes swept over the 4 killed ability users, and he shouted in a deep voice, "I've changed my mind. These ability users are all enemies. Don't leave them alive. Kill them all." As he spoke, he formed a seal with both hands and quickly sent them out. He activated the attack ability of the 4 symbols formation at this moment. Chapter 738. The female ability user, who was controlling the 2 fire dragons to attack Jin Shi, instantly felt a bone-piercing chill spreading from the ground up along her legs. Just as she lowered her head, her eyes widened in disbelief. Ice. Her legs were actually sealed by ice? Moreover, the ice was spreading to her upper body at a terrifying speed? How was this possible? Weren't the enemies cultivators? Were there also ability users among cultivators? Puff! A sword light flashed past, and the female ability user's neck was instantly severed. Her vision kept tumbling, and she saw her own headless body spurting blood. Massacre! It was also a massacre. Apart from Siwu and his 3 other companions, more than a dozen ability users were all killed in just 2 or 3 minutes. Among Tanshio's men, only Jin Shi had a cut on his arm, while the others didn't even lose a few hairs. What the hell is this place? Siwu had already discovered the strange situation in the 4 symbols array. He desperately launched attacks and even triggered lightning to wreak havoc, but there was still no way to destroy everything. What he could find was that his men were constantly being killed, while he could only helplessly resist the attacks of others, powerless to do anything. Big Brother Siwu, activate the blood curse. The cute girl staggered to avoid the attacks of several flying swords, and took out a paper talisman from her bosom. In an instant, Siwu and the other 2 also took out paper talismans. When the 4 of them used their abilities to activate the paper talismans, a rudimentary aura suddenly burst out, and a strong bloody light fused together to form a bloody storm. At the eye of the array, Tanshio's pupils suddenly shrank. After sensing the violent aura, he instantly used the 4 symbols array to roll up Mo and the others. As his body frantically retreated, everyone had already withdrawn from the 4 symbols array. Even when Tanshio retreated, he suddenly felt the surroundings of the 4 symbols array crack like glass, and then it was shattered by the impact of the bloody storm. Puff! 4 figures rushed out of the broken 4 symbols array, but at the moment they sprinted, they simultaneously opened their mouths and spurted out a bloody mist. Immediately after, the 4 of them looked like frosted eggplants. Their spirits dispirited as they fell to the ground 100 meters away. Tanshio looked at the place where the 4 beasts formation was set up with lingering fear. A huge pit with a radius of 100 meters had been blasted out, and it was more than 2 meters deep. He couldn't imagine how many of Mo and the others would have survived if he had retreated a few seconds later. This is the power of the blood curse? The killing intent in Tanshio's eyes intensified. Like lightning, his figure rushed toward Siwu and the other 3. Just as the 4 of them jumped up, he brandished his long sword and ruthlessly slashed at them. Boom! The 4 of them hastily set up their defenses, but they crumbled under the might of the sword. Moreover, The four of them were sent flying tens of meters away by the monstrous sword chi before crashing into the ground once again. This time, except for Si Wu, who was struggling to get up, the other three had already fainted. Pooh! Puff! The sword light flashed, and the heads of the three fainted paranormals were separated from their bodies. Si Wu, on the other hand, was silently slashed into two halves by Feng Yang, who drilled out of the soil. The dust had settled. Tan Xiu looked at the aftermath of the battle, as well as Mo Ao and the others who were sprinting over. He nodded with satisfaction and said, "We didn't even figure out the identity of this group of enemies, yet we killed them all. That's really interesting. Feng Yang, stay here. The rest will immediately clean up the mess." Feng Yang came to Tan Xiu's side. He rolled his eyes and whispered, "Do you want to set up a trap, boss?" "What do you mean?" asked Tan Xiu, confused. "Let's kill all these people. There must be someone more powerful behind them," said Feng Yang. "If we set up the scene, we can make them mistakenly think that it's the Stygian Club's people who did it. Perhaps a war will break out between these two forces." Tan Xiu raised his hand to touch his chin and thoughtfully said, "You mean framing them?" "That's right, framing them." Feng Yang nodded. "The Stygian Club can't get along with us, so we'll give them one more enemy. The people we killed were all adepts. If I also use my ability and leave some clues, then we'll throw the vampires' corpses there. I believe the people behind these ability users will definitely target the Stygian Club." Tan Xiu's eyes lit up as he smilingly said, "It seems that my men are indeed talented. Feng Yang, your suggestion is good. Let's do it like that." "Do you have any instructions for me to stay here, boss?" asked Feng Yang. "Let's not talk about it for the time being." Tan Xiu waved his hand and said, "You and the others will arrange it first. We'll enter the mountain half an hour later." Half an hour later, after everything was arranged properly, Tan Xiu led everyone to the place shrouded in white mist. He released his spiritual sense, yet it couldn't penetrate the white mist. It was as though the white mist in front of him had a viscous substance that strongly obstructed his spiritual sense. "Boss, are you going to break this array?" Mo Ao, who was at Tan Xiu's side, asked with a curious expression. Tan Xiu shook his head and took out a piece of paper from his interspatial ring. He quickly engraved the runes on it, and then folded it into a kite. The moment he loosened it, the kite seemed to have its own intelligence and flew into the white mist. Tan Xiu then led Mo Ao and the others to follow it and entered the white mist. This is a guide kite. As cultivators, you need some spells and divine abilities. You have cultivation, but you don't have the ability to cast spells and divine abilities. You'll be at a disadvantage once you encounter other cultivators in the future. I'll slowly teach you some spells and divine abilities when we return to Demonic City. Understood. Mo Ao and the others looked happy and respectfully replied. It was a guide kite. It was a small spell that was easy to cast. It didn't have much effect, but it could move forward in a straight line according to the master's intention. If one followed it into the mist, they wouldn't lose their way inside. As their footsteps continued to move forward, they went about 100 meters deep inside, and couldn't even see their own fingers. Furthermore, a special air pressure was blocking them, preventing Jin Shi and the others from going any further. "The pressure is too much, boss. We can't bear it," said Jin Shi in a deep voice. With his keen eyesight, Tang Xiu was able to clearly see everyone's faces. He found that their faces were pale and obviously strenuous. He immediately halted his pace and released a huge aura from his body to contend with the pressure. Puff! Tan Xiu's body trembled, and he retreated a dozen steps in an instant before he staggered and stabilized his body. However, he still coughed up a mouthful of blood. Just as he released his aura to contend with the pressure, a vast ocean-like power whizzed over and instantly crushed his aura. "Are you all right, boss?" Mo Ao and the others retreated one after another and surrounded Tan Xiu with worried faces. Tan Xiu raised his hand to wipe off the blood on his lips. He shook his head and forced a smile. "I'm fine. I was just careless just now. I didn't expect this array to be so powerful that the pressure it emits can injure me. However, I've figured out the principle of this array, so it'll be easy to crack it." "You can crack it?" asked Mo with a pleasantly surprised expression. I can crack it, but I can't, said Tan Xiao. We don't know what's inside this array, so there may be some unexpected changes if we crack it rashly. Therefore, you must follow behind me and pay attention to my footsteps. You can avoid the pressure in the white mist as long as you follow my footsteps. Yi Shursen suddenly asked, We haven't seen you comprehend the mysteries of this array, boss. How did you comprehend it? Tan Xiao glanced at him and smilingly asked, Do you want to learn something about arrays? Yeah, I do, said Yi Shursen with a dry smile. I'll write a book about arrays after we return to Shanghai. Tan Xiao nodded and said, I'll teach you some things when the time comes. As a matter of fact, I've been secretly observing the situation inside and analyzing the mysteries of this array all the way here. I just resisted the pressure in the white mist and peeked at the last part that I couldn't understand. The result was out of my expectation, and I got a bit injured. However, I've already peeked at the final profundity, so I can crack it if I want to. Yi Shursen suddenly understood and said with admiration, You're really amazing, boss. Don't flatter me, boss. Tan Xiao smilingly scolded him. You may become an array grandmaster as long as you work hard in the future. Yeah. Yi Shursen nodded with expectation. Tan Xiao then retrieved the kite again. Under its lead, the group passed through the white mist for more than 600 meters, and finally reached the foot of the mountain. It's so beautiful. Even these people who had killed people like Scything Flax couldn't help but be attracted by the beautiful scenery at first glance. The mist inside was very light, just like a fairyland with immortal energy lingering around it. The flowers were beautiful, the trees were full of vitality, the beasts were docile, and the beautiful scenery was hazy. What surprised everyone the most was that there was a gurgling river flowing upstream toward the mountainside. This scene defied gravity, as well as the colorful fishes that jumped out of the water from time to time, was an eye-opener for everyone. There were many antique and small bridges on the river, each of which had a different shape. Some were arched, some were straight, some were meandering, and some were even half-moon-shaped. Let's go up the mountain. Tan Xiao strode forward and quickly walked up. When he crossed the bridge and stepped on the ground, an invisible force pressed down on him. Despite his formidable strength, he was still shaken by the pressure. Be careful. There's something strange going on. Tan Xiao squinted his eyes and said without looking back. At the same time, he resolutely strode forward and walked inside again. With every step he took, he felt the pressure increase and each step was more strenuous than the previous one. Just like that, Tan Xiao led everyone forward. Chapter 739. As the saying goes, the more beautiful the appearance, the more extreme the danger lurks. Just like this picturesque mountain forest, which seemed to be full of flowers and shady trees, the misty white mist added a bit of immortal aura. But Tan Xiao and the others stepped on the bridge, and walked less than 100 meters before they halted their footsteps as if they were facing a formidable enemy. A white pigeon. That's right. It was a white pigeon, but its physique was dozens of times bigger than an ordinary white pigeon. It was not inferior even to a bull. It strolled lazily among the flowers and grasses. Even when it noticed the arrival of Tan Xiao and the others, it just glanced at them casually, and then spat out a flame. The moment the blue flame touched the flowers and grasses, they were instantly burned to ashes. When it fell to the ground, a football-sized stone was touched by the flame, and turned into charred ashes that drifted away with the wind. This monster. Shui Sha was very courageous, but he was still startled by the scene in front of him. Tan Xiao took a deep look at the white pigeon before his eyes slowly moved around. A few seconds later, he found an ant climbing on a towering ancient tree. The ant was the size of an adult's fist. It was tens of meters away, and even its claws could be seen clearly. Over there. Mo suddenly whispered. Tan Xiao looked in the direction of his finger, and his eyes couldn't help but twitch a few times. A hedgehog drilled out of the bushes 40 to 50 meters away. The hedgehog's physique was even bigger than the white pigeon that was as strong as a bull. The spikes all over its body swayed in an extremely rhythmic manner. Its pointed mouth and nostrils exhaled white gas that was like a cold air that formed a layer of frost on the flowers and grasses below. Keep moving. Tang Xiu didn't sense any hostility from these wild beasts. Even when he deliberately approached White Pigeon, it only glanced at him lazily, and then leisurely walked away as though it was taking a stroll in the park. Half an hour later, although Tan Xiu was surprised, he was still calm. However, Mo Ao, Jin Shi, and the others were shocked by the wild beasts here. As they climbed up, they had already encountered hundreds of animals after climbing a quarter of the way up. Each animal was dozens or even hundreds of times larger than the animals outside. These animals all had their own unique characteristics, but they all had one thing in common, which was flight. Even a pig could walk in the void and fly slowly. Spirit Beast Paradise. Tan Xiu smiled as he recalled the spirit beasts he raised in the immortal world. These spirit beasts were all intelligent, and some of them were very intelligent. For example, a group of apes that were more than 2 meters tall. Even though they did not have any ill intentions towards the group, they still playfully threw fruits at the group a few times. Boss, we can't go up. Mo A's forehead was dripping with sweat, and his face was flushed as he spoke with difficulty. Tan Xiu looked at Mo Ao and then at the others. Finally, he helplessly said, "Stay here since you can't go up. Ah Wu, you're wearing an interspatial ring, so let everyone pick the precious herbs and store them in the interspatial ring. Also take all the spirit fruits and ores." Understood. Mo Ao slightly nodded. They had encountered too many precious herbs and spirit fruits along the way, many of which were even 1,000 years old. A large number of trees had all kinds of spirit fruits, and even a faint fruity aroma could be smelled from afar. As for the precious ores, there were a lot of them here. They could find several precious ores anywhere they looked, and any one of them could be sold for a high price outside. There was no way up this mountain. Tan Xiu stepped on the stone and jumped again and again, constantly climbing while withstanding the pressure. All the precious herbs, spirit fruits, and ores he encountered along the way were all stored in his interspatial ring. It took him 2 hours to reach the halfway point of the mountain. In these 2 hours, his harvest was more than the sum of all the herbs, spirit fruits, and precious ores he had obtained outside. I can't go up. Tan Xiu was a bit regretful. He could only look at the majestic palace at the top of the mountain, yet his footsteps were blocked by the huge pressure from above. Fortunately, his physique was far stronger than ordinary people, else he wouldn't even be able to reach the halfway point of the mountain. Tan Xiu wanted to use this huge pressure to stimulate his potential and temper his physique, but the darkening virus outside had yet to be completely solved, so he could only give up and plan to come back again later when he had the time. On the way down the mountain, Tan Xiu encountered several 7+ meters tall spirit beasts, one of which was a huge tiger. Just the aura it exuded made Tan Xiu's heart tremble. Fortunately, these spirit beasts didn't have any intention to attack, and didn't even care about Tan Xiu's appearance. Whoosh! Tan Xiu jumped down from a boulder and appeared at Mo Ao's side. He smiled and said, "Gather everyone. Let's leave this place. There are so many resources here, boss. I think we should stay here for a while," said Mo Ao quickly. "It's not easy for us to come here, so we should bring more back so that we can have more resources in the future. We don't need to rush since this mountain can't run away." Tan Xiu smiled. "Let's solve the problems outside first, and then we can have a lot of spare time to look for cultivation resources. Don't worry. I'll call Xiaoxue after we go out, and ask her to bring some people here. It's me who's afraid of being poor. Please don't laugh at me, boss." Mo Ao suddenly understood and said with a smile. Tan Xiu just smiled and didn't say anything, yet he was well aware of Mo Ao's mentality. Speaking of which, the Everlasting Feast Hall indeed didn't have many resources. Although they had been spending a lot of money recently to buy a lot of medicinal herbs, precious ores, and other cultivation materials through various channels, the Everlasting Feast Hall had a large number of people and a large number of children that needed to be trained. Hence, the amount of resources allocated to each person was pitifully small. Quickly, Tan Xiu and the rest came to the foot of the mountain, and smoothly got out of the white mist-shrouded area. Everyone boarded the vehicles and directly left. After traveling for more than half an hour, the 4 SUVs directly headed toward Twin Brook City after they found that no one was following them. Taking advantage of this time, Tanxiu ate a red fruit. As the energy contained in the red fruit blended into his body, the faint feeling of hunger completely disappeared. Furthermore, he gradually fell asleep since he hadn't slept for 2 or 3 days. Creak! The sudden breaking sound awakened Tanxiu from his sleep, and the inertia nearly caused him to hit the chair in front of him. With a frown, Tanxiu looked ahead and asked, "What's the matter?" Mo turned his head and said, "There are dead bodies on the roadside, boss. A lot of them." Tanxiu stared blankly for a moment. After he opened the door and got off, he immediately saw dozens of corpses on both sides of the road. Some of the corpses had even rotted, and some bugs were buzzing around them. They're not killed, but infected by the darkening virus? Anger rose inside Tanxiu's heart. The Stygian Club's members were the culprits of the darkening virus. He got the news a few days ago that hundreds of people had died from the darkening virus. However, he didn't see any dead bodies, so his anger was not strong. At this moment, if the Stygian Club's members were here, he couldn't wait to use all means to exterminate those damn executioners. Collect their corpses and bury them. Tanxiu ordered and turned back to the car. He took out a cigarette, lit it up and took 2 deep puffs. He wanted to call Gu Xiaoxue, but found that there was no signal on his mobile phone. After thinking about it, he called Mo. It was because Division Commander Yang had given them some communicators when they came out of the Mist Source Island garrison base. All of them were stored in Mo's interspatial ring. Using the communicator, Tanxiu dialed Gu Xiaoxue's cell number and said, "Xiaoxue, I'll send you the coordinates later. Bring some of our people who are proficient in medicinal herbs and ores. We found a treasure mountain with a lot of precious medicinal herbs and ores." "Understood, Grandmaster," Gu Xiaoxue replied. Tanxiu thought for a while and asked, "How is Yenner now?" "Master still stays inside the exquisite pagoda to recuperate and only comes out once in a while," said Gu Xiaoxue. "However, Master's injury is healing very fast, and is expected to be completely healed within 2 years. That's good. Tell her to stay in the everlasting feast hall. I'm now carrying out a very important task outside. I can't tell when I can deal with it for the time being," said Tanxiu. "You'll understand the situation here when you bring some people here. Tell Yan, or that I'll go directly to Jingmen Island after I'm done with the things here." "Understood." After hanging up the phone, Tanxiu smoked 2 more cigarettes in a row. Mo and the others buried dozens of corpses. The place was in the middle of nowhere, and the surrounding environment was terribly quiet. However, not long after the car started, the 2 cars in front of them roared over. The 2 cars were driving extremely fast, reaching a speed of almost 180 kilometers per hour. When they saw the 4 SUVs, they didn't even think of slowing down. Instead, when the deafening metal music got closer and closer, they sped up a lot. Arrogant. Crazy. The most shocking thing was that there was a person tied with a rope on the roof of the car in the front. The person looked like a child. "Stop them." A cold light flashed in Tanxiu's eyes as he shouted in a deep voice. Immediately, he turned the steering wheel and immediately slowed down after moving to the side, moving side by side with the SUVs behind. As the window rolled down, he signaled the car driven by Yi Shirsan to stop. Screech! The 2 cars 100 meters away screeched to a halt, and stopped only a dozen meters away from Tanxiu's SUV. At this moment, Tanxiu could clearly see that the person tied on the roof of the car was a teenage girl. The little girl's clothes were ragged and bloodstained. "She's still alive?" Tanxiu's pupils suddenly shrunk. He instantly opened the door and went out. Seeing 7 or 8 burly men jump out of the 2 cars and walk toward him while cursing and swearing, a wave of hostility crazily rose inside his heart. Chapter 740. Tanxiu looked at the dying little girl on the roof. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect that these damned bastards would be so cruel to tie a living child on the roof of the car at a speed of 180 kilometers per hour. If the rope were to loosen halfway and the little girl was thrown out, she would definitely be smashed into pieces and turned into meat paste. Animals. Tan Xiu looked at these people as if he was looking at corpses. There was nothing but indifference. Hey, where the fuck did you come from? Fuck you. Are you deliberately blocking the road? Don't you know who we are? The big man in the lead quickly pulled out a knife from his waist and pointed it at Tang Xiu as he scolded angrily. Tan Xiu snorted coldly and raised his hand to stop Mo Ao and the others who followed behind him. He looked at the approaching big man and asked, "Who are you people?" The big man stopped 4 or 5 meters away from Tan Xiu and cursed, "We're your fucking father. We're Uncle Jinnen's. Why don't you ask around? Who in the entire Miss Source Island dares to block our little boss's car? Dahu, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and drive them to the side. Don't delay me from going to the power station. Beat them to death if they dare to talk back. Now is a good time. Even killing a few people is like killing a few ants. No one will care about it." A lazy voice came from behind the 7 or 8 big men. A young man with dyed red hair, earrings and gaudy clothes walked over while yawning. Tan Xiu was silent for a moment. His figure instantly dashed and appeared in front of the 7 or 8 big men in the blink of an eye. His violent fists bombarded their heads. Like a watermelon being hit, 7 or 8 heads were instantly smashed, and 7 or 8 corpses were kicked by Tan Xiu and flew more than 10 meters away. Ugh! The young man was stunned. His listless look disappeared and was replaced by a deep fear. He realized that he had made a mistake, which was that he seemed to have provoked a terrifying desperado. Furthermore, his subordinates were all top-notch experts who had practiced martial arts for more than 20 years. How could they be so easily killed by the other party? Tan Xiu reached out and grabbed the young man's neck, lifted him up, and asked coldly, "It's the father's fault for not teaching his son well. Tell me who you are." The young man was choked by the neck, and his breathing had stopped. As his face continued to turn red, the strength of his body's struggle also began to increase. But his eyes kept blinking at Tan Xiu, as if telling Tan Xiu that he was willing to speak. "Pa!" The moment Tan Xiu released him, he slapped him to the ground and then stepped on the side of his face, fiercely saying, "Quick, who the hell made you without tightening their belts?" The young man was stepped on the ground by Tan Xiu. He coughed and then shouted, "Take your foot off me. I'm Miao Wenlei." "You bastard, my dad is the richest man on Miss Source Island, and my family is the most powerful family on Miss Source Island. You offended me. Aren't you afraid that my dad will kill you? Miao Wenlei, this name is enough." Tan Xiu moved his foot and directly stepped on Miao Wenlei's neck. Then he fiercely kicked him tens of meters away and hit a big tree. Only then did he ask with a gloomy face, "How long will it take to get to Twin Brook City?" "More than 3 hours, answered Mo Ao. Tan Xiu nodded and came to the front of the car more than 10 meters away. After floating on the roof, Tan Xiu looked at the dying little girl who was not in a coma. He quickly cut the rope and carefully picked her up. This bunch of bastards. Tan Xiu found that the little girl had obviously been beaten up. Several of the bones in her small body were broken. The most important thing was that she had lost a lot of blood, and was cold all over. As he injected his primal chaos force into the little girl's body and quickly protected her heart and arteries, Tan Xiu took out a holy healing pill, broke off 1/10 of it, and fed it to the little girl. "Don't be afraid. I've cleaned up those bad guys. Just bear with it. I'll fix your bones. Just for a while. You'll be fine after a while." The little girl's eyes were lifeless and didn't have the slightest reaction. Even the injuries on her body couldn't bring her the slightest pain. Tan Xiu sighed inwardly. He knew that this little girl had suffered too much pain. Only after suffering for a long time would she become numb. At this moment, he didn't want to waste any more time. He quickly took off her coat and began to fix her bones. Due to the protection of his primal chaos force, Tang Xiu hardened his heart and put her broken bones back into place, even though the process was very painful for the little girl. She screamed miserably. The effect of the holy healing pill was excellent. Even if it was only 1/10 of the pill, it was still able to heal the little girl's injuries at an alarming speed. Tan Xiu took off his coat and gently wrapped her. His figure flashed and appeared in front of the off-road vehicle. He handed the little girl to Mo Ao and said in a deep voice, "Keep going." After arriving at Twin Brook City, Inquire about the richest man in Miss Source Island. Also, which family does that Meow One Lay guy belong to? Understood. Mo took the little girl and carefully carried her to the car, giving the driver's seat to Shueisha. A few hours later, a city appeared in front of their eyes. The 4 cars continued to hurry and soon entered the city. The once bustling city was now lifeless. There were almost no cars on the wide road, and only a few pedestrians hurried past the roadside. The Tang Manor Martial School was located in Twin Brook City. After inquiring, the 4 cars quickly stopped at the entrance of the Tang Manor Martial School. To Tanxio's surprise, there were 2 young men holding electric fly swatters next to the stone lions outside the Tang Manor Martial School, playing with their mobile phones listlessly. Who are you? One of the young men looked up and immediately frowned when he saw Tanxio and Mo behind him. I'm looking for Tang Han, said Tanxio. The young man looked at Tanxio with a surprised expression and suddenly asked, You don't have anything that can create static electricity? Are you? That's right. We're not infected, said Tanxio. How is that possible? The young man was shocked. Everyone in the entire Miss Source Island is infected. You know you're from the outside? And you're from foreign countries. Tanxio waved his hand to interrupt him and said, We're from the mainland. If this is the Tang Manor Martial School, I think I've come to the right place. Please take us inside to find Tang Han. Our schoolmaster can't receive guests right now, said the young man hesitantly. I'm her younger brother, said Tanxio. The young man stared blankly for a moment before he rolled his eyes and said, Our boss is an orphan since childhood. How could she have a younger brother? Brother, you don't look like you're here to make trouble, so I advise you to leave. Although the people in our Tang Manor Martial School are infected, there are still a lot of people who can fight. You'll know whether I'm her younger brother or not after you report it, said Tanxio. I'll give you a few minutes to go and come back quickly. The young man hesitated for a moment and looked at the people behind Tanxio before he finally turned around and ran inside. Inside the Tang Manor Martial School, inside an antique study room, Tang Han was holding a book and quietly reading it. Her complexion was a bit pale, and she picked up the electric fly swatter from time to time to turn on the switch to shock herself a few times. Schoolmaster, called the young man outside the study room. Tang Han looked up and said, The door isn't closed. Come inside and talk. The young man strode into the study room and said, Schoolmaster, there's a group of people outside, led by a young man who says he's your younger brother. I wanted to drive them away, but I found that the people he brought are all martial artists, so... Younger brother? Tang Han's expression slightly changed. She instantly got up from the sofa and said in a deep voice, Take me to see him. The young man looked suspicious, but he still nodded. He had just walked a few steps when he suddenly recalled something and said again, Schoolmaster, that guy who claims to be your younger brother said he came from the mainland. The most inconceivable thing is that he's not infected by the virus. Tang Han's pace instantly quickened upon hearing it. As she strode out of the martial school's door, her eyes fell on Tanxio's face. A complicated look flashed in her eyes, and she suddenly felt like crying. Ever since the darkening virus spread wantonly and infected the entire Miss Source Island, she had been looking forward to her family sending someone over. And at this moment, her family finally came, and it was her younger brother, Tanxio. Tang Han didn't have deep feelings for the Tangs, and she couldn't even treat her parents like family members. But since she received a message from her family 6 months ago, she suddenly found that there was another family member among them who suffered the same fate as her, and that was Tanxio. She had seen Tanxio's photos and information about Tanxio. She also knew a lot about what Tanxio had done in the past 6 months. There were very few people in this world who could make her admire them, but Tanxio made her admire him from the bottom of her heart, and she couldn't help but feel close to him. Tanxio. Tang Han's lips squirmed, and she quickly came in front of Tanxio, quietly looking at his handsome face. Tanxio also had an inexplicable sense of closeness and respect for Tang Han. Back then, she was sent away by her family at a young age, and the time she spent with them over the years could be counted on one hand. It could be said that she had sacrificed too much for the Tang family. There was no unfamiliarity or estrangement when they first met. Tan Xiao took 2 steps forward and hugged Tang Han in front of everyone's eyes. He whispered, "Sister, you've worked hard." Tang Han's body trembled. Tan Xiao's soft voice hit the softest part of her heart, and 2 lines of tears rolled down her cheeks. She didn't struggle and just let Tan Xiao hug her. She shook her head hard and bit her lower lip with her white teeth. "He understands me." Tang Han's heart was touched and warm. At this moment, she felt closer to her younger brother, who had suffered the same fate as her. You're tuning into the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.